we introduced ourselves to Nigel. Do you just want to say hello to the chat as well and introduce yourself and talk about your role here with the Communist Party?
Sure. Hi, chat. My name is Drew Garvey. I'm the Ontario leader of the Communist Party. I'm also the candidate in this election in Beaches East York, which is in East Toronto riding.
Cool. Yeah.
This is Drew. He's short and succinct.
Yeah, succinct. We love it.
I gave Drew, for context, I gave a whole life story about everything I've done for the last like 10 years.
Okay. Well, I could give you I don't know. There's big parts that are boring, but why not how I got involved or how I ended up as a candidate?
Yeah, I would love to hear about that.
Sure. So, I grew up in Mike Harris's Ontario in the 90s. Not all dissimilar from today, the situation we have at the provincial level. I would go to school and my teachers would be talking about education cuts and changes in the funding formula that Mike Harris rammed through. This led to big strikes in the teachers and then rotating general strikes. And my parents were kind of healthcare workers, social worker and somebody that sold medical equipment to hospitals. So healthcare worker adjacent, at least. And they would come home and talk about all the big cuts to education, to healthcare at the time. There was big privatization going on in my mom's sector in social work. So I kind of grew up in a very anti-Tory environment and a place where there was a lot of resistance going on too. Like there was, like I said, rotating general strikes at one time, the Harris Days of Action. And then what happened in around high school was the beginning of the September 11th, and then the War on Terror and the lead up to the Iraq War, which I found the Iraq War build up broke my brain. Like I just remember screaming at CNN, like, why are you doing this? You're gonna kill millions of people, and then they did.
Yeah, that was galvanizing for anyone that was kind of remotely politically aware at that time, right? Just the level of criminality and corruption that seems so open, the obviousness of how terrible and horrible of a mistake it would be, followed by all the worst outcomes immediately coming true, and then none of the political or media figures that promoted it having any negative repercussions whatsoever. All of these things happening at once, just I think for an entire generation of people that were paying attention, really did kind of a number on us.
It's sort of interesting because those guys are the same people advocating war now. Like it's not like things have changed.
No,
and like
still doing
even
the same
personalities. You think they'd be their children or something. Nah, it's just the same guy. Like
yeah, George Bush's remarks the other day about switching around Ukraine for Iraq.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about that, because for anyone that I was just describing that was radicalized by that kind of process, that watching that clip was like extremely, I don't want to say traumatizing, but it's an unbelievable, the fact that 20 years later he can kind of openly, he basically admitted to it, to being part of this horrible crime, right? Not just this big mistake that happened, but this terrible atrocity, horrible crime. And just to have everyone kind of chuckle it off, oh, ho, 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 I'm 75 or whatever. It's so bizarre seeing these folks still joking around about that. It's extremely alienating.
The collective amnesia is kind of incredible. Like, like people are like, oh, this time we have the war right? Like every single time is the right. Actually, last time was wrong. Yes, I give it granted. Last time we shouldn't have gone to war, but this time we've got it. Like,
this time we've got to trust these intelligence guys and the military establishment guys. I know that many times in the past they've been dishonest about certain things. This time, though, they've got it right, and we have to do the right thing and stand by these folks. Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and just what still does terrify me, and what I think, what I saw in 2003 or whatever, and what other people saw as well, was just like how the media can just I guess fall in line so quickly and ratchet up. And I think the what's going on in Ukraine right now is clearly an example of that too. Just like everybody falling over themselves to try and ratchet up warmongering pressure and whatnot. So it's I don't think things have gotten better. Maybe a little bit. The justifications have moved more towards responsibility to protect and humanitarian intervention and stuff, and that's part of what's going on in Ukraine. So people the one thing that gives me hope is that people think that they're doing a good job, and the justifications for the war have to be put in terms of helping people around the world. it's all bogus, of course, but it does give me a bit of hope that if you can cut through that, people do want to do the right thing internationally. They're just terribly misled by big business politicians and the media.
Well, one of the things too, when you talk about the Russia-Ukraine conflict as well, this is something that I've been covering on the show a lot, is that it's very easy when you live in the West to feel like there's this kind of consensus about it. And it's like when you feel these forces getting pulled along and you feel like, am I crazy for wanting to go against this? But you realize also when you start paying attention to what people outside of the West are saying, people in the global South, people in Africa, people in Central and South America, you realize that you are in this bubble, you are in this Western bubble. And there isn't this big global consensus about this, about who's the good and bad guy in this or any other situation. And it's really illuminating, I think, when you start paying attention to what people that don't live in this heavily propagandized Western bubble are saying, and you realize it's quite different from what we're told when we turn on the TV to think about this kind of stuff.
You also like see it still from the same sort of academics that in the past have like sort of argued to not go to war. So like even as much as people deride Chomsky, like Chomsky also was opposed, opposed in Yanis Farka.
Yeah.
Like some of the academics that have like been anti-war before are still anti-war, and I'm like, okay, that's how I know. Part of a good tell is that you're still like following this anti-war line that precedes you, I suppose.
Yeah.
It is sort of, and I think one of the reasons why I joined the CPC at least is that the warmongering is sort of ubiquitous to all parties except for the CPC. Like even the Green Party and NDP, they walk around the idea of like militarization. About I remember there was like a questionnaire or like a conversation that was being had last year about counting the military's expenditure of like CO2 and emissions and stuff like that into the tally. And like for the most part, like the NDP and the Green Party were like opposed to that rhetoric that like the military does actually emit a lot of greenhouse gases, and we need to have a conversation about that's also destructive. And so there's like the fact that like people won't talk about the peace option, and that NDP co-signed liberals, and therefore and they've always kind of been sympathetic to going to war. For me, NDP often feels like they're the kind of people who just like want to please everyone. They want to say the nice soft thing, everything as soft as possible without taking like sort of a principled stand. But there are people in the party that do take a principled stand, but then like get ousted for it or derided for it, and it's really frustrating to see that so many people that are like anti-war and are aware of, have principled stances on these things, have to follow the NDP line, because otherwise they might get pushed out, or X, Y, or Z might happen.
Yeah. What was it? I believe someone once said that the Social Democrats were the moderate wing of fascism. I can't recall who said that, but I believe someone said that. We should probably listen to what some of these folks had to say. Drew. Okay, so one question I have for you, because we talked about the surreality of seeing, the George W. Bush and these kind of neocon war criminals kind of still years later being accepted and with no real feeling of progress since that time. And you mentioned Mike Harris, and I guess that's a good way to talk about Ontario and the election. Is that demoralizing? The fact that you kind of grew up in this radicalizing period of the Mike Harris administration, who was of course very hostile to public sector workers and teachers unions and all these important and created all these like conservative policies which economically really were devastated the province. And now here we are 30 years after the Harris years, and there's an arch conservative, big business, backslapping conservative still in charge of Ontario, still going after public workers, still fucking up and destroying the economy and through reactionary conservative policies. Is that kind of like a sort of depressing feeling? Does it feel like there's been a real lack of progress since the Harris years?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I don't know. One thing as a communist, you can kind of step back and look at the deeper systemic things. So like it's disgusting and shocking, but at the same time, it's not surprising. And I'll try and get more concrete there. I mean, the Doug Ford, was reelected after over a decade of liberal rule, and the liberals were voted in to basically undo, like they were promising to undo a lot of the Mike Harris cuts, but actually they undid very little, and then they just kept making small cuts of their own for over a decade. So like the last election was just not so much about Doug Ford, it was about the total collapse of the Liberal Party, right? And you can see that in lots of different ridings across Ontario. So, did Ontarians really vote back in Mike Harris under Doug Ford in 2018? I don't think so. I mean, Doug Ford didn't even run on really a platform besides buck a beer in 2018.
Yeah.
So there's no legitimacy to the cuts that he carried out, especially the brutal austerity budgets of 2019 and stuff that he enacted. What I do find frustrating and a little bit mind blowing is that, 4 years of the Ford government, what an easy time he's getting by the media. Front page of the Toronto Star last week, a whole puff piece about how Doug Ford's changed, and like the fact that 4,000 people died in long-term care under his watch. 10,000 people have died in the opioid crisis under the Ford government. There's just mass death in this province caused by lack of regulation and cuts that can be directly attributed to Doug Ford. I mean, the Ford government canceled all inspections of long-term care corporations, and then brought in laws that protected them from liability of potential lawsuits from family members of their loved ones that died. Like that's pretty direct in terms of the deaths in long-term care. So it is mind-blowing that he's had such an easy ride, especially, in bourgeois politics, capitalist politics. It's not usually like people talk about policies or political issues or anything. They like to talk about little corruption scandals and stuff to get people out. But I mean, Doug Ford does not have a squeaky clean past. It might surprise you to know, like him and his family are pretty implicated in some outrageous and horrendous stuff. So, the press has just been very disciplined in holding everything back. He's been getting tons of donations. Like the Conservative Party has vastly out fundraised both the Liberals and the NDP for the last 4 years. What does this show? It just shows that big business is totally behind the Tories. And I guess from that sense, that's why it's not surprising that he's leading so far in the polls, and that the Liberals even haven't managed to get much traction because big business is firmly behind him. And why shouldn't they be? Like, they don't care if people die in long-term care. They don't care if housing is totally out of people's reach, if there's ballooning homeless populations. They don't care if the climate crisis is going to accelerate over the next 4 years if Doug Ford's in office, and that we might end human civilization. What do they care? Profits have grown under Doug Ford, and that's the bottom line. So from a systemic approach, like, because there hasn't been deeper changes and challenges to corporate power over the last 20, 30 years. And so in that sense, not much has changed since the 90s. This is what we're getting. But I guess the message that we're trying to put out there this election is that we need to fight for more fundamental change. It doesn't look like that's going to happen on June 2nd, but we're trying to, over the next couple of weeks, over the next week, I guess, put out the message that we need to fight for policies that would, mean fundamental change in people's lives, increasing wages and living standards, making all education free and accessible at all levels, expanding healthcare to include eye, dental, mental health care, urgent action on climate change, including public ownership, like all these key issues that would really make a change in people's lives. That's what will motivate people to get out in the streets and fight for a real alternative. And that's what's needed. It's not just that we elect the NDP or the Liberals and they're going to save us. No, we tried that in 2003 or whenever the Liberals were elected, and it brought us the second round of Tory governments, which we're in now.
Yeah. And I think the fundamental question that I think needs to start being addressed more. And it's cool that this is happening during the election season. Obviously, I know there's a history of conflict among communists about how to treat these kind of like bourgeois electoral processes. But I think my main takeaway whenever we think about this is is what people have said, is that it's a time, regardless of what you feel about the political system or the electoral system, it's a time when many people are willing to talk about politics and are willing to listen to different ideas, and they're politically engaged. So that's why I think it's cool that these alternative ideas are getting out there. Like you're talking about, all these crises that Ontario is facing and that Canada is facing and that any country in the West is facing, the crises with housing, with the climate, with corruption, with the media, with the economic bubble. All these things are symptoms of our economic system. That's the thing that no one can really put words to in our mainstream political system. This is all symptoms of capitalism. And while different parties might have different ideas about how to move along from that, all our mainstream parties fundamentally are not interested in any way in changing our economic system and are operating within that framework. And no one can ever have real alternatives to these crises if they're not willing to name the actual problem and directly start confronting this problem and talking about fundamentally changing the way that our society is organized. And no other party is doing that, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think the thing is that, as you pointed out, like politicians have been for a while now willing to move the superstructure, as it were, but there's been sort of a moot point on addressing the structure, as it were. So there's no real change in politics because there's no change in the economic development or the form of economic development that we're processing. So everything is done on this sort of shallow aesthetic layer of oh, now we're going to do some more green tech, we're going to do some more we're going to give these people a little more rights. We might pull it back, but we might give them some more rights. It's going to be a little hubbala. People are going to have a conversation about that. But, we're going to pivot the conversation away from the real meat and bones of the conversation, which is the structure and the mode of production that we're under, and how we can displace that, or how we can even shift that in any capacity. We fundamentally, since sort of the Reagan era, and since sort of the burgeoning of neoliberal economic politics, no one has dared to touch the concept of changing our mode of production. That's not a conversation anymore at all. And so I think it's come back a little bit. I think since the pandemic, I think that conversation is being had more and more. It's unfortunate that the reason we're having the conversation is because a lot of people died. That's why we're having the conversation at all.
And I mean, a lot of people, not this is the fundamental thing that I find I find it frustrating that it hasn't led to more outrage, is that not only have thousands of people died, some like you're pointing out, sometimes through specific neglect, in terms of these long-term care facilities, etc. Not only have thousands of people died, but there's also been this massive upward transfer of wealth to the most powerful people in our society, which is just criminal, right? And it's just, that's the frustrating thing, is that I think there's so many folks in this country who are aware fundamentally that that's an unfair system, that they're getting screwed, and that's in that system. But, our mainstream politicians are not addressing this. Our media is not addressing this. And I know you guys are addressing this, and I'm happy you are. But that the realization also is that we live in a very deeply propagandized society that have been kind of told since birth that the idea of communism is scary, and socialism is the scary thing that we need to be, intimidated by, and we can't talk about, and leads to 50,000 billion deaths and whatever. People really believe this kind of stuff. So that's been the kind of frustrating thing for me commenting on these things over the years, is seeing these contradictions come right to the forefront. It becomes so clear to everybody, but to have the answers still be, it's difficult to make people understand where these answers can come in with this kind of class analysis, and then we need to embrace socialism. Have you had, is that something you've noticed as organizers, as communists? Is it tricky because even though we have the material answers to why these crises are happening, is it tricky to get people to accept that there is another way of doing things? Or is it tricky to get people to overcome this kind of barrier that they've built up because of decades of propaganda and anti-communist propaganda in our society?
I think, yes and no. Clearly, one of the outcomes of what you're describing is just the growth in the far right, unfortunately. The people that pretend to look at the huge transfer of wealth during the pandemic, pointing to whoever, Bill Gates, the WHO, China, the international conspiracies, whatever. Those are the people that have the microphone put in front of them, right? So and they have simple messages like, what the Tory party's, what Pierre Poilievre and the People's Party and stuff is putting out there now, like Justin Trudeau's spending too much, printing too much money, and it's causing inflation, just inflation. These are very simple arguments. They're wrong, and I guess the Freedom Convoy and whatnot got a lot of press. I mean, a lot of it negative, but at the same time, if I'm somebody that's totally apolitical, largely politically illiterate, I'm pissed off, I'm at home, I lost my job during the pandemic, the social supports were not enough. I was told that I had to go into work, but I couldn't see my family. So I'm starting to get pissed off about all this. I lost income. And somebody's out there having a big opposition to Justin Trudeau, which, Justin Trudeau does come from a very privileged class background. He did absolutely facilitate massive transfer of wealth through various federal programs. This is all true, but then the answers people are being fed is just racist garbage or anti-science stuff, and anti-communism. Like, there's a lot of anti-communism that goes along with it.
That's exactly why it was bizarre seeing some of these like American communists lecturing us about supporting this freedom convoy when so much of that was based in this kind of like explicitly right-wing rhetoric and explicitly anti-communist rhetoric as well. Mm-hmm. Before you go on, Nigel, I know you have to go soon, right? You have to go in a few minutes.
Actually, I worked it out. I can chill for a little bit longer.
Oh, okay, great. I just wanted to give you a chance to like give a final plug to what you're working on, but we can do that at the end.
I can hang around
if you can hang out for a bit longer. Okay.
Yeah.
Drew, you can feel free to continue if I interrupted you.
I think as opposed to most communists, I'm a little hopeful. When you go to, I think that communists sometimes make the mistake of creating an audience of anti-communism. And I do that to myself as well often. But like when you go door knocking and when you talk to people aren't so opposed to those ideas. And like when the people who are opposed to those ideas are the ones that control the media for the most part. And that's why it feels overwhelming. But when you really talk to people don't really have an opposition to it. It's just that like, they haven't seen sort of they just don't know even about us or what communists are. Like, people don't really know what communists are at all, which is surprising to hear, but like, that's most of the reception they get. They're like, oh, there's a communist party?
I mean,
cool.
even
like,
not even average citizens, but our political leaders don't understand. I watched Pierre Poilievre's interview with Jordan Peterson, and they discussed socialism at length. Neither of them have any clue what the word socialism means or what any of this is. Literally no understanding of what it is to be a socialist or what socialism even means. Pierre Poilievre couldn't talk about socialism for longer than 30 seconds without referencing Animal Farm. Like this children's novel. This children's novel is this explicit frame of reference for this entire economic system with centuries of history and all kinds of struggle and all kinds of interesting things we could learn about. Has no interest in learning that or understanding any of these concepts, but these people talk about it at length like it's this evil, scary thing we need to be opposed to.
But in Pierre's defense, that's all that is taught about socialism in elementary school is Animal Farm.
That's right.
Like I definitely think that we should be careful about like anti-communism is real, but I think it's real sort of institutionally, like insofar as the government is opposed to it, the bourgeois are opposed to it. But I think for the most part, the proletariat are fairly like sort of unaware and are willing to hear you out. And I think like out of like 20 houses that you knock at, only like one get real mad at you or whatever. And so it's a conversation. It's sort of this important thing where like it's easy to change people's like and whatever preconceptions that like even the slightly like bad communist aesthetic thing that's happening. And I think like I think people can recognize when people are talking earnestly and talking about things that they deserve and things like that. And so, like, I tend to be a little bit more hopeful. It's just that we have to be more careful. We have to be careful about the institution specifically. It's just like they don't want to print our media and stuff like that, but people want to hear us out for the most part.
Well, that's why I'm trying to take over Canadian media so we can compete with them. It's not I'm still in my early stage of my 5-year plan though, so eventually I'm going to be able to bring that. But for now, we got to deal with this. But yes,
good luck. Yeah, I was door knocking a bit last weekend in a relatively. It wasn't social housing, but it was there's no such thing as affordable housing in Toronto, but it was relatively low income housing, and a lot of younger South Asian single men. So I imagine these are people that are, coming here to send back some money back home, workers, and so a lot of positive reception amongst those people talking about housing, especially the need for more for real rent control and rent rollbacks and whatnot. And nobody hesitated signing petitions and stuff in the name of the party. Nobody blinked at the word communist. And then there were a couple people of my color skin that I spoke to, and they were, pissed off at corporations, pissed off at the pandemic. But then when you got into it, there was like very odd, like very xenophobic ideas and whatnot. Like people, so, this is what people are being fed is like, the housing crisis is being blamed on immigrants.
Or foreign investment, right? Either foreign immigrants or foreign investment,
which get mixed up very easily in people's heads, probably purposely by the people that are putting forward those ideas.
Yeah.
So, I do think that it's important that communists and leftists get out there and have a real systemic analysis and demand fundamental change. Because if not, then the field is wide open to racists, essentially, to build their base, and that's what they've been doing. And I should say they've got way more resources than us. Like, of course, the new Blue Party, they're running in every riding. The Liberal Party is not running in every riding in Ontario, and they blew up overnight. Same with the People's Party before that. They managed to run one election, they didn't exist. The next election, they run in every riding. Yeah, that just shows they've got deep pockets from somewhere.
Deep pockets, and also, I think, a sort of media establishment. You've got the liberal media establishment that's willing to sort of like air their ideas out of this idea of like fairness or free speech or whatever. We may not agree with them, but we've got to make sure we air their ideas, which of course they don't apply to the other ideological direction, obviously. And then of course you've also got this massive network of conservative media as well. That's more than willing to air their views and air these kind of viewpoints. It's a really huge deficit that if you're on the left that you're starting out from, which these guys are just able to immediately have this huge platform, not only the deep pockets, but a big platform to reach people. And people are very alienated. And that's, like you pointed out, when they're this alienated, they're willing to listen to these kinds of more extreme messages. And only one side is really getting the opportunity to speak to people on a mass scale.
Yeah. And but the important thing is not to despair about it, like nobody's going to come and give us millions of dollars to run in every riding or whatever, but or get a whole bunch of advertising.
Yeah, but maybe someone should.
Well, if you're out there,
President Xi, please. Our people are crying out for freedom here.
But it's just going to come through door knocking and patiently building organization. And like the one thing that you have to take hope in is like working people in this country are the vast majority. And ultimately the ultra-right and right populism and fascism has a very narrow base. Like it might pretend to be very broad. It might try and use a whole bunch of wedge issues to bring people together. But ultimately the class interests just aren't there. Yeah. So it's in the long term, it's unstable and we're the majority. So we just need to patiently build. And that's all we can do.
Yeah.
The thing that I heard the most when campaigning is that I just don't believe that voting does anything. It's like, that's the line. So it's it's less of a I think we're fighting less of a battle for anti-communism and more of a battle of like nihilism, of
Yeah.
like, broad like apathy, like
Well, because
just
people
like,
pick up on the idea that we don't live in a democracy, and they're aware fundamentally that they don't have that much democratic input on how our economy or society works, right?
yeah, like every other, like, even people who were voting NDP, like I was talking to one guy who was like, had like helped campaign for the NDP several, and he's just like, I just don't believe any of this does anything. I don't think they listen at all. And so it's a question of like, harnessing and showing people that we're like trustworthy, and like that we're there and representing their voices, and that, we're not just chasing seats. And once we get that trust, it's not, I don't think we're battling that like that significant amount of
Yeah.
anti-communism beyond the institution specifically,
Yeah.
beyond like cops,
Yeah. Nigel, you mentioned you're from Kerala, and I'm just
Yes.
wondering, like, I think Kerala is a really interesting example of, a place where dedicated socialists have kind of managed to build socialism within a state that's kind of hostile to it, right? It's a
Mhm.
capitalist country. It's a Western ally, but the people of Kerala have managed to cobble together a much more socialist vision of society within this state. Um, how would you like? What are the lessons, I think, from Kerala and what the people of Kerala have managed to accomplish? How can you take these lessons and transpose it into this context? Obviously, it's a different country with different institutions and a different history, but are there lessons from what the people of Kerala have managed to build that we can use in Ontario or elsewhere in the West, in these states which are pretty uh, opposed to socialism or hostile to it? What are some lessons we can use to build socialism within this environment that the people of Kerala have shown us?
So I think well, you touched upon it, that the history is different. I think like I give a lot of credentials to CPIM, but also there's like a historical recognition that like even under colonization as a princely state, Kerala was extremely progressive even then. We were one of the first provinces in the world to institute free mandatory education for uh, their peoples, for kindergarten, basically. So even before the existence of CPIM, we were fairly progressive. And there's like, and furthermore, there's like consistent clashes in sort of the politics of CPIM in both the literal violent way and also like just politically. And like, it's sort of interesting because like when I ask my parents about the CPI and things like that, it's like, you don't get an answer. They're just like another party. Like it doesn't show to them that they're socialists or tie together the fact that they like, the reason why they can read is probably because the CPIM has existed there for X
Yeah.
amount of years. So it's this like, what can we learn from them? Um I think there's like, I think like history is there for CPIM in a way that isn't really here. We're in a settler colonial nation. And that's going to be an uphill battle, and we live in the imperial core. And so like, in a way we have much more to lose. But I think what we can learn from them is that like is sort of um the regularity with which they like go protesting and like go down the streets and just like make their name heard in places and stuff like that. And then the like, I think one of the things that really made people like aware of how much CPIM sort of made a difference is when they instituted policies around COVID. So
Yeah.
in Kerala, when we were dealing with COVID, my uncle was getting off a train from Bangalore to my hometown, and like as he was getting off the train, like a doctor was there, swabbed his nose, and was like, "Go home and stay home. I'm personally gonna visit your home, right? And I'm gonna swab you again, and then let you know if you get right." So it's not just a situation where like the institutions are sort of, you have to approach them and get help from them, like go to ontarioservice.ca and then visit the website. It's sort of the situation where like they go to your door and do work and like approach things that way, and like spend a lot of time working with people on the ground, like regularly building structures of. I think that's the most important lesson to learn from any global South country, is that before they get into power, they always build really good, strong coalitions of like community in the places that they are in. And if you look at like Nicaragua, for example, when the Sandinistas initially came to power, the places that succeeded the most under Sandinista rule were the ones that a priori had some communist affiliation or were like socialist in some form and had strong cadres of people working together. So like, it's important to recognize that like getting to power is like the final step. You need to have sort of the groundwork community of people working together and looking after each other before you get to that point of like, oh, we're in institutional power now. Because that's how people know to trust you. That's how people know to trust you. That's how people know who you are and that they can have their voice heard. Because if you don't build that, if you just appear like the Blue Party appears or whatever, they have no idea where your money is coming from, if they can trust you at all. So one of our like, the most important lesson I think we can learn is that like, you need to spend a fair amount of time, like, just like organizing people in those communities, have a personal relationship with them, and then you can have a conversation about like what it means to be like in significant power. So I think that's the main thing. I think that's the thing that like CPIM has done pretty well, is that like approach people where they're at as opposed to expecting them to come to you,
Yeah, very interesting. Drew, is that how you view building power with the Communist Party? Because as we know, like we talked about elections and why it's important to participate in them. I talked about it earlier, reaching out to people that are more all of a sudden attuned to hearing different ideas or things. But as we know, like the goal of the Communist Party isn't just to win seats in this kind of like parliamentary democracy. What is the sort of plan for the Communist Party of Ontario, or if you want to talk about federally, to building power, and how does it coincide with this process of running for seats in Parliament? And how is there a sort of idea in place of how to build real power through while incorporating this process?
Yeah, I invite anybody that's interested in this to read our program. It's like 100 pages long, so I can't get into all the detail, but it's available on the Central Party site, not the Ontario site, but the federal party. So communist-party.ca. It gets into the kind of the big picture in terms of how we see the transition to socialism. Of course, like, we're not at the verge of socialist revolution tomorrow, so it's difficult to be too prescriptive, of course.
Yeah.
But at the same time, things can move quite quickly, and history these days seems to be moving quite quickly.
Yes.
So the big picture is, I mean, we're not a parliamentarist or electoralist party that we think that you vote in a communist, Nigel and I go to Queen's Park and then we'll be able to seize the means of production for you. And that'll be it.
That would be easier for me if you could do that. Yeah.
So it's the working class itself that needs to be active, or at least the big organized sections of it, in order to carry out an actual revolution. It's not going to be even the Communist Party. That's why Leninists talk about a vanguard party. It's not that the vanguard party does the revolution. It's that their first project is to be kind of a guiding theoretical and ideological beacon in terms of revolutionary direction, right? So that's the big picture. But how we get there in capitalist Canada in 2022, we talk about a people's coalition. So this would be extra parliamentary at first, at the very least, and this would be able to move from all these defensive battles that we're facing now as different movements, Indigenous people fighting for sovereignty and self-determination, anti-racist struggles against police brutality, the labor movement struggling either politically or economically, student movement fighting for free education. If we can bring people together in some kind of common direction forward, then we can not only fight defensively more effectively, but also start to win real demands and real change. And the fight for reforms doesn't make us reformists. We're anti-reformists, but we see the fight for immediate reforms, significant enough reforms that'll inspire people to come out on the streets as necessary in terms of building working class power in a local, and it's got to be done in a local way as well. It's not some slick ad campaign put out by this or that union, which some unions rely on. And then eventually this people's coalition on the ground would have some kind of political representation. And we would like to think that would include communists in a pretty central role, but we don't think that it would only include communists. It could include even left members of the NDP or the Green Party or whatever, or lots of independents or other socialist parties that would probably spring up in the event that things were moving in that direction in Canada. So, we do see coalition work at the grassroots and politically as necessary. And then we would have some kind of representation in government in parliament that would, be able to advance what's going on the ground, but always making sure that the real power comes from the grassroots, right? And not being stuck in electoralism. But even all this would look maybe something like the transition we've seen in Venezuela over the last 25 years or so, building up to some kind of popular government. But that doesn't mean you necessarily have socialism, right? We are a revolutionary party. We recognize the need for a revolutionary break with capitalism, and that would at least involve public ownership and democratic control over key sections of the economy, at the very least. And that's, that hasn't happened in Venezuela, for example. So how that happens and the kind of dynamic, the push and pull of class struggle is really dependent on the situation. But we don't talk too much about what the immediate issues will be at that stage, because it's just not fully intelligible at this stage. But that we do recognize the need for some kind of revolutionary break and a restructuring of the state and government. And just going back to what Nigel was talking about in terms of local power, you see that in all kinds of socialist countries too, like how China or Cuba were able to fight the pandemic so effectively is because block by block, you have party organizations or neighborhood organizations or women's organizations, student organizations that pretty much everybody, not everybody, but big organization at the local grassroots level, where you just don't see that in capitalist countries, And in this sense, socialist countries are much more democratic than capitalist countries because you have that actual local popular political power.
Sure. Yeah. Really interesting. Well, I think just to touch on what you were saying too, it's when you talk about building socialism, I think for some people, they think that that's just a big red button that you press, the socialism button that just immediately delivers worker control of all these institutions. And as we know, that's not exactly how it works. It's a process. It's a struggle, which takes, years and decades sometimes. And that's sometimes when people get a little bit ahead of themselves and they start talking about or criticizing other countries that are not further along on this path or have done things that they disagree with or what have you. People sometimes lose sight of that it is supposed to be this struggle. It's this process of struggle and building. And I'm happy that you two were involved in this struggle. I'm happy you're able to come on the show to talk about this stuff. You're both candidates in this election, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to just talk about your ridings and how people can get in touch with your campaigns with the Communist Party if they want to, and just you can kind of sign off after?
Yep. I'm Nigel Cherian. I'm running in Hamilton Center. Hamilton Center is a place close to my heart. I've spent a lot of years working in the area and working with the people there. And I think it's sort of a very interesting area in the history of Canadian politics in general. And I think it's a stronghold for a lot of very, very progressive politics and the stronghold for a lot of good action in the future. I do, if you want to get into contact with the Communist Party in general, it's info@communistparty.ca, I believe. And you can visit our website and join that way. All of our links are on the Communist Party Ontario. All of our information about our emails, our Twitter profiles, everything like that. My Twitter is @NigelCherian, just my full name, and that's all I have.
Okay, thanks, Nigel. So I'm Drew Garvey again. I'm a candidate in Beaches East York, which is an East Toronto riding, in between Toronto, Danforth, and Scarborough, essentially. So yeah, you can check out. We don't have separate campaign websites, so what Nigel just said applies to me too. CommunistPartyOntario.ca. You can check out our platform, and really, we don't put forward a platform to say like, hey, on June 3rd, when we're both elected, we're going to be able to carry this out. It's more like we're trying to popularize a set of policies that people can organize around all year round, and that's the only way that we're gonna get it. So I guess the point of voting communist, which if anybody's in one of our 12 ridings, the point of voting communist is to send the clearest possible message to those in power and to the working class as a whole that socialism is back on the table, that we're fighting for fundamental change and for these policies that we're putting forward. And that any vote for the Communist Party, means that you have that long-term vision that we do need to build a socialist movement in this country and move in that direction. So even if we, in first past the post, even if we don't get elected this election, it is a long-term struggle, and you're welcome to join and check out our party. I think our program and stuff is at the Central Party website. So that's communist-party.ca. But thank you very much for your hospitality, Rob. Thanks for inviting us.
Of course, my pleasure. Thank you to Nigel and Drew.
Have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Nigel Cherian and Drew Garvey, folks, of the Communist Party of Canada, the Communist Party of Ontario as well. Thank you to the two of them. It's very good talk. That was fun. I did not prepare for that at all, I must admit. Not because I don't take this shit seriously, I do, but I was just very busy. But great conversation. Hey, we're freaking building socialism over here. Oh. We're freaking building socialism over here. Hey, yo. Right, and thank you also to Azure Scapegoat for the raid 16 minutes ago. Much appreciated, thank you. Hey, gabagoo. Oh. Do you want to get mad at a near attendant tweet today? Is it the tweet about how the cops are outgunned? You just got to get some more guns to the police, and that should solve all the violence. Thank you, Nira. I'm actually blocked by Nira, so if you tried to send me the tweet, I wouldn't be able to look at it because I'm blocked. She slid into my DMs one time. I don't know if I've talked about that. Near attendant slid into my DMs because I was making fun of the I was making fun of the think tank for like working with they were working with the AEI. They were working with the AEI on something, and I was like, that seems like a weird thing for this progressive think tank to be doing, working with this neocon think tank in this partner project. And she slid into my DMs at it was like 1 a.m, like in the middle of the night. I don't know what the fuck she's doing. And the weird Twitter stands, that's right. What'd she say? She came in with she just woke up from her day drunk, that's right. Yeah, she was like, that's right, Lodane. She came in the all-time great DM line. She opened with, I'm planning to block you. She was like, hello, I'm planning to block you. Hello, I'm planning to block you. And I'll show you, actually. Weird, strange woman. You know? She's a strange woman. Whoops. That. Strange woman. Hi. Okay, it was in the morning, actually. Sorry. 10:26 in the morning. She says, hi, I'm planning to block you. I believe in good faith discussions on Twitter, but you know we have a joint grant to AEI on nationalism. It's not a donation, and yet you keep on. And your tweets without tagging me seem a little cowardly, at least to me. I'm always happy to engage in a serious conversation. My email is on the internet, and welcome that. Have a great day. It's funny someone like yelling at you in this like corporate focus group speech. Have a great day. I'm surprised you didn't say thanks with the exclamation point. Thanks. You're a coward, and by the way, I'm going to block you, and I welcome conversation. Warmly, near attended. I end every email with thanks. Of course you do. That's the way. If you imagine when you forget to put the exclamation point, Alana, when you get an email and it just says thanks with no punctuation, no exclamation point, and you're just like, oh my God, why am I being attacked? Why are you attacking me? It's so devastating. It's so devastating without the exclamation point. I like to start an email with one, good morning, Rob, and end with it too. Of course you do. Because you're a normal, nice man. Thanks. Versus thanks. Hi, I'm just reminding you not to forget about this meeting we've got coming up. I have some really important business I'd like to discuss. Looking forward to it. Thanks. Like, oh. Maxie, oh. If you have any questions or need me to explain further, please feel free to reach out. Anyway, she continued. I said, I'm not sure how working with the interventionist neocons in the AEI, let alone participating in photo ops with people like Netanyahu or Modi, is going to do anything to combat authoritarian nationalism, because that's what they were working on with AEI on. They were working on something with the AEI about like authoritarianism, which is like Putin and Jeremy Corbyn, is what their main targets were. So I was like, I don't see how participating in photo ops with Netanyahu or Modi is going to do anything to combat authoritarian nationalism, but okay. In any case, I think it undercuts your position that it's monstrous to try to take away people's health care when you're working with individuals and organizations that are working to do just that. I got a bunch of DMs, got a bunch of responses to this. And she said, just as long as you attack Bernie Sanders for working with Mike Lee, who's trying to take away healthcare from people, I'm sure it undercuts his Medicare for All plan. I don't co-sponsor bills with the GOP. I'm sure there's plenty of people in her caucus that do, though. I'm sure you will readily tweet out attacks on Bernie's support for Medicare for All, as dangerously undercut by his past co-sponsorship of bills with hardline right senators. I will look for that today. And then 4 minutes later, I've criticized Modi multiple times. I know I'm not owned when I send multiple lengthy DMs to strangers critiquing me on the internet. Again, this is like 2018. I had what, a few thousand followers at that time. It's just literally just a random, literally a random pro wrestling journalist. And notice how she doesn't mention Netanyahu, by the way, because I specifically said Netanyahu. She says, I've criticized Modi multiple times. By omission, though, who have you not criticized? Who have you not criticized? Interesting. But yet you're going to lecture people about authoritarian nationalism. And then do not tweet that I got mad. So that was my interaction with Neera Tanden, Democratic Party insider Neera Tanden. I was really laughing a lot. It's really surreal, these moments when you like wake up and you like check your DMs and you see like this like high profile political insider, like could have been possibly chief of staff in the Hillary administration. And instead of being chief of staff in the Hillary administration, she's writing me, Rob Rousseau. She's responding to my random tweet shitpost that I did on twitter.com. Instead of like, working in the White House, which is what she thought she was going to be doing. And she's writing angry DMs to Rob Rousseau on Twitter. Very strange. Nelson, ha ha. Yeah. Very, very strange. 2018 was weird for that kind of stuff for me. All kinds of weird stuff was happening around that time. Like, did I tell you, I retweeted this the other day because every time Gervais comes up, I have this tweet about it that I did this thread of, I just took quotes from like edgy subreddits. Like I'm 15 and this is edgy and that kind of stuff. Like random, just like edgy Tumblr bullshit. And just put the quotes over Ricky Gervais to talk about like, oh wow, this is so incendiary. And I just started like getting these fake quotes and just putting them onto like really banal observations and pasting them onto Ricky Gervais pictures, like stand-up shots. And I did a couple of those, kind of just edgy atheist stuff, like that I found on Reddit. I saw when you retweeted that and I sincerely thought that this was for real. No, I just made these up. We made it up. We made it up. And then there's this one. It bothers me that the intelligence of animals is measured by how willing they are to obey the commands of a human. Same goes for students in schools, innit? I put like some innits and some yeahs and some like British expressions in there. Just to make it seem more like believable. And then this is the crazy thing that happened next was Julian Assange of WikiLeaks somehow saw this and took my fake Ricky Gervais image. Julian Assange took my fake Ricky Gervais image and retweeted it. It's like, what the fuck? I was like, what is going on here? That was very strange as well. Again, 2018, all kinds of weird, I was on Fox, all this stuff, weird stuff started happening to me. So Julian Assange stole my fake Ricky Gervais meme and then retweeted it. This was like one of his last acts of freedom. And he's an easy guy to make fun. I know that's the problem with Assange, is that he alienated so many people in 2016 by being a huge prick to everybody because he thought maybe Trump would pardon him, and really turned himself into kind of this toxic, divisive figure when it is a crime that Assange is like in prison and is being persecuted still for exposing war crimes, which is something that I am against. Even if he is a kind of a dipshit, and if he did weirdly steal my Ricky Gervais meme, it is still criminal that he's being persecuted for exposing war crimes. I don't want to take away from that, but it was quite silly that Julian Assange somehow, Mr. Internet Spy Master himself, found my fake Ricky Gervais image and retweeted it. Retweeted my fake Ricky Gervais image. Yeah, he's being tortured to death for doing journalism. Absolutely less funny. It's less funny when you put it like that, certainly. That's not something that I agree with. And we should free Assange, even though I find he's kind of a weird dude. We should he should still be free. He stole your meme. That's enough to be in jail. That's right. He's in meme jail now. So free Assange, but it was very funny that he stole my Ricky Gervais meme. That was not something, when I started doing those Gervais memes, that was not something I expected to happen. It's not illegal to be cringe. That's right, Ben. I'm cringe all the time. I say cringe stuff all the time. There's nothing wrong with it. Free him so we can go back to making fun of him without feeling weird about it. I think that's a good way of putting it. Embrace the cringe, absolutely. I don't think it is, but alienating all the support you have isn't a great plan. No, it is not. No, it is not. And they bent over backwards to like appeal to Trump. They worked with like Trump to like release damaging stuff on Democrats. They really like pivoted to trying to help Trump during the 2015-2016 election and tanked their credibility in the process by supporting these fucking neocon racists and freaks. And did Trump pardon Assange for all that? No, he did not. This is why you don't fucking trust. You don't tank your credibility on the hope that Donald Trump is going to follow through and do something that helps you. Big mistake. I could have told him that back in 2015, 2016. That's a big mistake. You're tanking your whole credibility so Donald Trump does you a favor? Really? How did that work out? It didn't work out well at all. They don't care. The neocons don't fucking care. They're not going to help you. Assange was always a standoffish figure, even during the early years of WikiLeaks. Even still, the org did legit good journalism. Absolutely. I mean, the collateral murder tape was a highly radicalizing moment for a lot of people, including me. And Chelsea Manning was in prison for that. Assange is still in prison over it. I don't really like him, but he doesn't deserve to be in prison over it. Okay, Johnny, why don't you enlighten me about what happened? That's my understanding of what happened. Okay? Assange thought because Hillary Clinton was openly talking about like assassinating Assange. I understand why Assange was against her, but they explicitly pivoted to like supporting the alt-right and helping Trump. That was my impression of what's happened. You might have a different understanding of it. I don't think I am talking bullshit, though. I don't think I am. They were very, very supportive of like the nascent alt-right movement and pivoting to try and deliberately help shitty conservatives such as Trump, Donald Trump Jr., and this kind of stuff. Like, that's the reality. Yeah, hopped on board Team Pepe. That's exactly right. And I believe the reason was because he thought he could get pardoned from Trump, which blew up in his face. That's why you don't support Donald fucking Trump to do the right thing. He's orange. Right, but the motivation for that is in question. Maybe not supporting Trump as such, but destabilizing the U.S. I mean, perhaps that's it. Regardless, I mean, it was a movement that was like openly antagonistic to immigrants, refugees, that was like openly courting this kind of like white nationalism and not using sort of dog whistles like other conservative movements was. I get wanting to destabilize the US. I too want to destabilize the US. That's why I was spreading misinformation online so much. It was part of my own small efforts to destabilize the US. You can do that though without supporting these like extreme right-wing movements, racist, misogynist, antagonistic to immigrants, people of color, marginalized groups. You can destabilize the West without helping those people. Yeah, that's what I mean, Katrina. I mean, I said that. Hillary did have it in for Assange beforehand. My memory is hazy because I seem to recall her calling for his execution. That's absolutely right. Like I said, I'm not surprised why he personally hated Hillary. Or, you know, I have no, of course, it's the fucking Hillary and the Democratic Party. They're warmongering psychos. So I'm not surprised. But you can be against the liberals and the neoliberals, as you should, as we all are, while not helping people even further to their right. This is what these folks don't get. This is what the lack of class analysis does to an MFer, by the way. Assange seems like an edgy Redditor who just so happened to do very good work. Shouldn't be getting prosecuted, but the Assange worshippers are weird AF. I think that's a good way of putting it. You know what? I think similar to Greenwald, I was really drawn to Glenn Greenwald's work throughout the Obama administration because he was exposing the corruption, he was exposing the brutal foreign policy, the imperialism, the violence. In retrospect now, like I talked about this the other day when Greenwald came up. In retrospect now, it seems like what he was more doing was exposing liberal hypocrisy. And it seems like that's what his animating force was, not exposing war crimes, not being an anti-imperialist, not being anti-war, but literally just like making Democrats look bad because I don't like them and I find them annoying. And I think there's a little bit of crossover there as well with Assange. Whatever the motivation, the release of those emails has been incredibly revealing as to how the government functions or why it doesn't. Yeah, I agree. There wasn't anything really damning in those emails, but it was highly interesting and I think important in terms of understanding how the Democratic Party works. He's also just a civil liberties guy. Yeah, he's a libertarian. Exactly, just like Assange, i.e. not left-wing in any way. He rolled the dice with Trump, who was less captured than the intel-loving establishment Dems, but that roll came up snake eyes. But that's the problem. It's like you got to be smarter than that. And again, I'm not Mr. fucking genius either. I'm not Mr. like genius political analysis, even though I posture as that. As you all know, I am not that at all. And I saw it's easy to see through someone like Donald Trump when they're making these arguments, or the idea that he was ever going to be like anti-establishment or anti-imperialist. I mean, obviously that was always bullshit. And if you got suckered into that, you're a mark. And Assange did get suckered into it. I'm sorry, but he's a mark for that. There are MLs who are guilty of this too, being so anti-lib, you become a sucker for reactionary shit. Well, to look no farther than our patriotic socialist friends and their support of these like crypto-fascist convoy movements and that kind of stuff. Rob is just a humble man that lives inside a giant triangle. Thank you. If you're telling tales on people in power, they're going to come for you. Yeah, absolutely. That's what I mean, though. It's just like it was clear from moment one that Donald Trump, while being a danger to the liberal establishment, and obviously was hated by the liberal and conservative establishments, didn't mean that he was going to be any improvement, you know, in any of this stuff when it comes to foreign policy or domestic policy. Because fascism, as we know, is a promise of a false revolution. And if you understand a little bit of theory, you can see through this kind of shit. And you don't fall for it because you're aware that it's just another reactionary movement that's even often even worse than what we currently have. Anyway, that was a long-winded explanation of the time that my fake Ricky Gervais meme that I created online was retweeted by none other than Julian Assange. Like I said, it was a period of I talked earlier in the stream about my my beginnings in media and how I kind of got to the position that I'm in, and that's part of it was that year, that 2018 year, and all this kind of weird shit started going on. Regardless of anything that I've just said about Assange or any of that stuff, he should not be in prison today. That I 100% agree with. I don't agree with like the Assange fetishization, or the way he's become this kind of like celeb to these all kinds of like weird cultists. I don't agree with any of that shit. I don't really like him personally. But he should not be in prison today for exposing war crimes. That was, in fact, regardless of motivation or what he's done since, that was a heroic thing to do. Okay, thanks for the reminder, Outrun. I got to do... What do we got? Oh, by the way, sorry for... I saw the stream was kind of interrupted a little bit when I was doing that interview. It was seamless for me, but I know I think folks got disconnected during that interview. It was because I had a VPN. I had a VPN on, and I forgot to turn it off when I started the stream, and then I turned off the VPN during the interview, and I think it disconnected everybody. I apologize. Just a little blip. You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Interlude? More like interlude.
Interlude? Oh my goodness. Thank you, Tiniest Boop. Just one moment here. This segment worked. This pitch segment, the pitch zone, worked out yesterday. We're going to try it again. We're going to try and see if it works today. So folks, if you just tuned into this stream for the first time, this is of course an extremely exciting opportunity for you to support this channel and support this content, but more than that, make a life-changing decision to join one of the most dynamic, exciting communities here on twitch.tv, which is the TRRS Friendship Triangle. As you can see, this is how the system works. You do not want to be one of these schlubs on the outside looking in of the Friendship Triangle. What you can count on me is subscribe to the channel. Not only will you get some of the very best emotes available on this entire platform, you will become part of this extraordinary, life-changing community. Gift subs and get involved in the base level of the Friendship Triangle. By gifting less than 5 subs, you'll exist here in the Chaos Zone in the middle, which is many people thrive in the Chaos Zone, including mod of the show and TRRS producer Rodane.
You just become an elite member of the Friendship Triangle
into the elite level of the Friendship Triangle, where of course the patented trickle-down clout system is the most potent. That's where the clout is the most potent, up in that elite level. You get there by gifting subs to this channel. It is a life-changing opportunity. It's a life-changing moment for you. You should be very happy congratulations to you for being here today to get this amazing opportunity. Take a few moments to thank Tiniest Boop for the 10 months of Tier 1. Thank you to Tiniest Boop. Thank you also to 10,000 Sandwiches for the 3 gifted subs. Thank you, 10,000 Sandwiches. Very much appreciated. Also, a big thank you to valued community member Gen X Bushy for the 5 gifted subs. Thank you so much to Gen X Bushy for the 5 gifted subs. That's an elite member of the Friendship Triangle system. So we are now all halfway through level 3 of this hype train, which is of course a very exciting moment, an opportunity for you to get not only the wonderful emotes available on this channel, but also special Twitch emotes that are gifted upon completion of these kinds of hype trains. And thank you to Alana Nana for the 3 gifted subs, getting us up into that level 4 section. Thank you to Alana Nana. You can count on all the support.
And have good old
thank you as well to Comrade Social Distancing for the 2 gifted subs. Very much appreciated. Extremely generous community member Comrade Social Distancing gifted 619 gifted subs in this channel. That's absolutely remarkable. Thank you very much to Comrade Social Distancing. And we've got an offer in the chat from Progressive Canuck. Any little riblets out there need a slug, hit me up. Got a couple to give, but they're going fast. So if you are experiencing this stream for the first time, this exciting opportunity is available to you right now. If you're not already subscribed, Progressive Canuck is offering some gifted subs. Thank you, Progressive Canuck. And thank you, Part Ian, for the gifted sub. 15 gifted subs in the channel from Part Ian. Very much appreciated. Puts Part Ian into that elite level of the patented Friendship Triangle tier-based reward system. Thank you to Part Ian and to everyone that's contributed so far. Folks,
you've just become an elite member of the Friendship
Triangle. As we talked about endlessly on the show, we're going through extraordinary historical times. Very alienated. Very isolated. What do we need during this time? Well, not only do we need community, not only do we need entertainment, not only do we need to be entertained, not only do we need to be informed, we need a sense of belonging. We need a sense of community. And that's what this community offers, that other Twitch channels don't offer. The opportunity to be a little less alone, a little less isolated, a little less alienated. And sure, maybe some of you have friends and family, but as we know, when your friends and family aren't supportive of certain social or financial decisions that you're making, those are what we call toxic people that do need to be cut off. And their toxic, pernicious influence will not be able to affect you. You will have a new family. You will have new friends in this community. And you won't need your old family and friends who don't support you in the things you do. Okay? That's not something that anyone wants in their lives, especially as all these incredible, powerful political and economic forces control so much about our day-to-day existence. Suppressive persons, we don't want them. Thank you very much to Dakadoon for the 5 gifted subs. Thank you, valued community member Dakadoon. Very much appreciated. We are approaching the sub goal now. And again, folks, not only is this a wise financial investment, not only will this lead to access to
you can count on
this patented trickle-down clout network. This will also provide you with community and a sense of belonging during these troubling historic times. Very alienating and isolating. Thank you, Progressive Canuck, for the 2 gifted subs as well. Thank you so much to Progressive Canuck. Very much appreciated. We're through level 5 of this hype train. Thank you very much, folks. And we are in reach. We've got 2.5 minutes left of the hype train, and we are in reach of the sub goal. A few more generous community members or chatters could get us to the sub goal. And once again, folks, must remind you this amazing opportunity. Not only is it only $5 a month, but if you do subscribe to Amazon Prime, you do get one free Amazon Prime Twitch subscription per month. And you can subscribe to this channel and get all the wonderful benefits that I've described. You can subscribe to this channel and have all that completely free of charge. All you have to do is click a little button, the little Amazon Prime button, and can subscribe you to this channel and get you involved in this amazing community, which is a benefit and part of your already existing Amazon Prime membership. Very much appreciative of all our valued Prime subs. We are now 90 seconds away from the end of this hype train, folks. We're 90 seconds away from the end of the hype train, and we are approaching the sub goal for the day. And remember, this is the last TRRS stream of the week. There will be a weekend period after today. At no time during that period will I be asking you for money. Will I be asking you for anything? Will I be asking you to subscribe to the show? Will I be asking you to give subscriptions to the show? There's 2 entire days of respite from my incessant fundraising, which you're forced to do on this platform.
Support the most subversive stream. Rob is the best.
Thank you, Up the Reds, for your 5 months of Prime subscription. Very much appreciated. Very much appreciate the support and for the comments about the world's most subversive stream. Folks, I mean, there's one thing to be subversive in your real life. There's all kinds of forces at play right now. You can be subversive in your life, but how can you prove it? How can you prove it? Right? What can we do? What can we physically do to show our discontent with our social and economic system? One thing you can do is subscribe to Twitch's most subversive stream. There's many millions of streams on twitch.tv, day in, day out. There's only one stream, however, which is the most subversive stream on this platform. That is TRRS. So please, join the TRRS Friendship Triangle today. Thank you very much, folks. Thank you for supporting the show, and thank you for contributing to the hype train. Almost there. I'm going to work on getting to the rest of that goal for the rest of the day, but I really appreciate it, folks. Thank you. Thank you, my friends. I appreciate it. I really love that music. I really love that music. It's hard doing that pitch voice for 10 straight minutes. I think what I'm going to do is make a whole presentation. If I have the image of the triangle with some flashing subliminal messages and some weird, I want to do an actual video that I can play during these moments. And I can talk over the video, but I would love to have that kind of VCR effect with some flashing subliminal messages and some weird imagery and stuff happening. I'm going to work on putting that together. I need to be better at video editing. A PowerPoint would be good too. Yeah. I'm going to take a short break. All right. I'm going to take a short break, just for 5 minutes. I'll come back. I will come back. I got another 2 hours to go. Okay. So I'm going to take a short break, go to the bathroom, maybe get see if there is some kind of snack situation I can get. I'll come back in 5-10 minutes and we will continue the stream for today. Not totally sure what we're going to do. We're going to work on that. Okay, we're thinking about that. Okay, talk to you soon. And that's an awesome scene. I've been like so inspired by this movie. I'm not, without giving too much away, I'm writing something now that's heavily influenced by Total Recall, and I've written a script in the past too. I wrote a script for like a sci-fi, like a pilot for like a sci-fi drama that also had a scene that was directly ripped off of Total Recall in it. This movie has been like a foundational piece.
You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through
of my whole persona. I know it's spoiler. I know it's an old movie and spoilers shouldn't count. But also, if in all honesty, if you haven't seen this movie, if you've not seen Total Recall, you should immediately watch it. And I don't want to spoil it for you because it's a wonderful cinematic experience. Thank you, Moss World. Thanks for the gifted sub to Third Lotus Prince. Thanks, Moss World. No, don't. I don't think you need to move Mission Impossible. We'll set this one up in the future. Okay. This is all just making me want to watch Dune again, but the new one or the David Lynch one. Man, I liked the new one a lot, but like when I watched it I talked about it on the show, it ended up just making me think about the David Lynch one more, making me want to revisit that. The new one is cool. These people need air. I really do truly love Schwarzenegger as an as not only as an actor, but as a creative personality. I must admit. You know, say what you will about Arnold. It is really just unimaginable, like an incredibly informative figure for me as someone who's like growing up. Like I gotta say, probably I would say four movies out of my top 10 favorite movies of all time are Schwarzenegger movies. Like that's not a coincidence. That's not a coincidence. And not only that, I think he brings a really good, interesting energy as an actor, but like doesn't get enough credit as someone who like this was in '87 when he was just like the man. He was like the man in Hollywood. He was the biggest box office attraction. He could work with whoever he wanted. And these were the movies that he wanted to do. Like he didn't want to, he wasn't just getting like cast and stuff. He helped like put this creative team together. He wanted to work with Verhoeven on this movie. He wanted to work with John McTiernan in Predator. You know, he was choosing these projects and he had an amazing creative instinct for working with screenwriters and directors who were doing really interesting things and not just like generic Hollywood schlock. And he managed to turn these things into big successes, but like doesn't get enough credit as a sort of behind the scenes creative force to help bring these projects together. And yeah, I would say Terminator 1, 2, and Total Recall and Predator, I would say all in my top 10 favorite films of all time. So you got to give Schwarzenegger some credit for that. Last Action Hero is my guilty pleasure and it rocks. I mean, talk about it. And that was kind of like his first like highly public flop, right? But it's interesting. It's kind of an interesting failure in retrospect. There's a lot of weird, fun stuff going on in that one. I am Comrade Social Distancing. I am a huge fan of RoboCop. Like I love this whole Verhoeven period, but weirdly, I didn't watch RoboCop a lot. Like growing up, I watched Total Recall. These are the movies that I watched for whatever reason, not because I didn't like it, but just because I just didn't own it. RoboCop wasn't part of my like obsessive rotation of movies that I watched. Twins is really good. Twins is an awesome flick. And once again, he's the biggest action star. And he's like, I want to do a comedy with Danny DeVito. And he does a weird, wacky road trip comedy with Danny DeVito, and you know what? It works. It worked. It fucking rules. My old boss was a motorcycle stuntman for RoboCop. That's really cool. For whatever reason, it just wasn't in my rotation. Anyway, it's like that's the weird thing about watching these films in the 80s and 90s when I was growing up. And I think that's the really bizarre thing, is then like being an adult and living in the future. And like we were talking about the ways that things came true, like a lot of these sci-fi creators were talking about in the 80s. As I've talked about many times, the actual future compared to the future that I imagined when I was a kid, when I was watching films like Total Recall, is way stupider. Although Verhoeven did understand the stupidity aspect, especially in RoboCop and the satirical like commercials in RoboCop and stuff. He understand the stupidity and the silliness of the future as well. Although I think the actual future is significantly more stupid than even Verhoeven predicted. I think it's significantly dumber and weirder than even Verhoeven was imagining, which is saying something.
This is some guy, Rob Russo, some leftist based in Canada. I was turned on to this sick individual, and I found this.
Can you say, see you at the party, Richter? Yeah, I can. Thanks for the raid, Dan Simpson. What's up? What's up, Dan Heads? Bring it in. Bring it on in here. I was just like playing clips from the film Total Recall and talking about some of my favorite flicks and how the past that I was imagining as a kid growing up watching movies like Total Recall, how living in the future now matches up with the vision of the future that I had at the time and the vision that these sci-fi creators and people like Paul Verhoeven had of the future. And I was just talking about how it's like significantly dumber in many ways than even someone like Verhoeven was imagining, which is saying something. If I'm not me, who the hell am I? Great stuff. Big fan of Arnold. It's true. And one thing I didn't see until like recently, just in the last year I saw this, was Schwarzenegger's like big breakthrough role
This is some guy,
as
Rob
himself.
Russo, some leftist based in Canada.
In Pumping
I was
Iron.
turned on to this sick individual, and I found this.
Hey, thanks for the raid, Left Flank Vets. Bring it on in here, Left Flank Vets. I guess I got to talk about. It is kind of serious what we're talking about a little bit. Maybe I need to be more talking about the news and stuff. Now I'm getting pressured. Now that there's people showing up to watch this. I was just talking about some of my favorite sci-fi flicks and Paul Verhoeven, and Total Recall. And how some people like Verhoeven tried to sort of predict the future. And I grew up watching this kind of stuff and seeing now living in the actual future. And how everything's even stupider than what we imagined. This is stuff that Verhoeven did get. Really loud. Thank you for the raid, Left Flank Vets. I'm not even acknowledging any of the emotes, any of the illicit, creepy emotes that are being posted in the chat. Yeah, post your little emotes. See if I care. See if I care. Doesn't bother me at all.
Magnavolt, the final word in auto security. No embarrassing alarm noise, no need to trouble the police.
This is This is what's coming this decade. This kind of shit.
And it won't even run down your battery.
The fetishization of violence stuff. Is
Magnavolt.
more.
Lethal response.
Is it time for that big operation? This may be the most important decision of your life. So come down and talk to one of our qualified surgeons. Here at the Family Heart Center, we feature the complete Jarvik line. Series 7 Sports Heart by Jensen. Yamaha, you pick the heart. Extended warranties, financing, qualifies for health tax credit. And remember, we care. Rat alert. Rat alert.
The Democrats are probably sponsored by that company. The Democrats of the RoboCop future. They work with lobbyists from that exact company. They sell people on means-tested access to it. That you get tax credits for buying that product, that healthcare product.
You crossed my line of debt.
You haven't dismantled your MX stockpile.
Pakistan is threatening my border.
That's it, Buster. No more military aid.
Nuke 'em. Get them before they get you. Another quality home game from Butler Brothers. It's back. Big is back, because bigger is better. 6000 SUX, an American tradition.
They say 20 seconds in the California sunshine is too much these days. Ever since we lost the ozone layer. But that was before Sunblock 5000. Just apply a pint to your body and you're good for hours.
You can just transform yourself into an avatar person. This is totally coming, yeah.
Sunblock 5000. Protection for the new age.
Isn't it weird that the future is like turning out even weirder and stupider than this, you know? That's not ideal. Do you ever think about that? Like, I don't know if it depends on how old you are, right? But yeah, I grew up in the, if you grew up in the 80s, early 90s, I was thinking about what's the 2022. When I was a little kid, I dreamed about this and what this would be. And it's so fucking bizarre to be living it now. Like, this is me. This is I'm literally this guy.
Unveiled a French-made neutron bomb and affirmed its willingness to use the 3-megaton device as the city's last line of defense.
And the president's first press conference from the Star Wars orbiting peace platform got off to a shaky start when power failed, causing a brief but harmless period of weightlessness for the visiting president and his staff. We'll be back in a moment.
Is it time for that big operation? This may be the most important decision of your life. So come down and talk to one of our qualified surgeons. Here at the Family Heart Center, we feature the complete Jarvik line. Series 7 Sports Heart by Jensen. Yamaha, you pick the heart. Extended warranties, financing, qualifies for health tax credit. And remember, we care.
3 dead police officers, 1 critically injured. Police union leaders blame Omni Consumer Products, OCP, the firm which recently entered into a contract with the city to fund and run the Detroit Metropolitan Police Department. Dick Jones, Division President, OCP.
Every policeman knows when he joins the force that there are certain inherent risks that come with the territory. Ask any cop, he'll tell you. If you can't stand the heat, you better stay out of the kitchen.
Although seriously wounded, Officer Frank Fredrickson escaped and identified this man. Clarence Bodeker, unofficial crime boss of...
Verhoeven loved these like wiry, balding guys. It's very similar, isn't it? You got Ronnie Cox as the big bad, and you got a wiry, balding man. Verhoeven, man. He saw far into the future. Clarence Boddicker is one of the scariest villains ever to me. Well, that's what I mean. I like this propensity to bring these kind of like unassuming guys and just make them really scary and dangerous. Starship Troopers will always be one of my favorite movies. Of course, yeah, I rewatched that a little while ago. Like, I grew up loving Aliens, the James Cameron film Aliens, right? Because of the Colonial Marines in Aliens, which were very much inspired by Heinlein and Starship Troopers. So it was cool seeing Verhoeven do Starship Troopers, which had this kind of similar thing. And even though Starship Troopers is like a very like strong satire, of course, that's I think the cool thing about Aliens as well and James Cameron is that it's not like he just took the aesthetic of Heinlein while whitewashing it. There's a lot of that satire present in Aliens as well. When you have these like corporate backed soldiers, basically basically be a part of the East India Company, but in the galaxy. Tonight on TRRS, people traumatized as kids by Verhoeven films. I mean, I rewatched Total Recall so many times, and I must have been like 8 or 9. Like, I was pretty young. And you just, when you're growing up in the early 90s, again, I'm giving away my age here. If you're growing up in the early 90s, you have a VCR, and you just have a bunch of tapes. Right? And just the tapes, the movies that you have to watch, those are your movies. And it's like you have a little selection. And as a kid, you gravitate to whatever tapes you have. And yeah, for me it was like Predator, Total Recall, Jurassic Park, Terminator 2. And we just like rewatch them like over and over and over and over and over again. And in retrospect, yeah, Total Recall is a fucked up movie to watch being 8. Not only just watching it, but watching it repeatedly over and over and over again and memorizing every single frame of it. Starship Troopers happened because it was too low-key for the execs to recognize the U.S. Nazi satire. I mean, that's the really funny thing about the end of the movie, when it's like, when Neil Patrick Harris comes in, Neil Patrick Harris comes in the full Nazi like SS trench coat thing. Just in case it wasn't totally clear, in case anyone missed the point of this. It's like Verhoeven's like, okay, here you go. I'm telling you, here it is for you. In case you missed this message, you have Doogie Howser showing up in full like SS regalia.
What's it thinking, Colonel?
With his like fake telepathic powers. Like,
it's afraid. It's afraid!
And the fucking funniest part of the movie is like almost immediately after, when they just show, there's like this clip, one of those would you like to know more clips, and it's just these random scientists, just like with the creature capture, completely randomly just jabbing it with like needles, and like they don't even know what they're doing, and it's just clearly like the aliens just going like and they're just like stabbing it with these like prods. But yes, if you didn't understand that it's a movie about fascism, it's like Verhoeven in the final little bit is like, in case you missed out on this, it's going to really spell it out for you. You can tell, yeah, the 12-year-olds, you can tell they're losing the war. That's the really interesting thing. And you realize, like, yeah, this is all just propaganda. Like, they randomly captured one of these bugs, and they have no idea what they're doing. And they're just, like, poking and prodding it, but they're still just getting their fucking asses kicked. To the point that they've got to, like, get 12-year-olds in their military. Because that's the amount that they're, like, completely decimated in this conflict. Starship Troopers is the only Verhoeven film I watched with my dad, and he didn't like the fascist tones and launched into a long rant in Spanish about how the citizens of Buenos Aires were all white Americans. Now that meant the Starship Trooper future was the one where all Latin Americans had been supplanted by the gringos. And yeah, that's exactly what it is. Like, he was right to make that connection, obviously. That's why it's a film about a successful fascist society. If you have successful, like, fully Nazified future of humanity. I don't remember, but doesn't it also imply that the humans started the war? Yeah, it's implied at some point that it was some kind of false flag. It was some kind of false flag that led to the attack that got humans involved in the war. Which gets the main character involved. Which, as we know, is the false flag is a center recurring theme throughout the history of fascism. From the burning of the Reichstag to it was a kicking off the military coup in Indonesia was a disputed kind of false flag incident. It's been other false flag type moments throughout history, instituting certain fascist regimes. There's been other such incidents, as we know. Gulf of Tonkin, yes, is one example. Even more modern examples. Did you see District 9? I watched it recently and thought the way it mocked the bureaucracy and post-hoc justification of police violence. I really enjoyed District 9 when it came out. Definitely think it's due for a rewatch. I love the effects by Weta Digital. It does have some kind of dark undertones, especially coming from the perspective of like a white South African filmmaker. Was talking a false flag or a misunderstanding of who is attacking who? Wasn't it two U.S. ships shooting at one another? Well, I think that's when you study this kind of history also, and these kind of false flag incidents. A lot of it is what is it about? Not so much like how the incidents happened, but how they were spun in order to drum up support for, certain, military efforts, or that's to allow these kind of like civil liberties to drop, or for invasions to happen. That's kind of the interesting thing is the way that sometimes like incompetence is kind of woven into it. As we see with a lot of these kind of forces as well, you have a lot of the time them putting all these pieces into place. So when these moments come, they can take advantage of them and use them, spin them into propaganda purposes. Yeah, Operation Northwoods, exactly. They spelled out in the CIA, spelled out exactly this process that they planned on employing and did frankly, considering President Kennedy didn't want to go along with the plans that were presented in Operation Northwoods, and then he was conveniently removed from the situation. Shortly after, denying the CIA's efforts to institute these kind of policies, he was really, interestingly, as a strange coincidence, he was removed to a permanent end from the situation. Shortly after was the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which put the Vietnam War into overdrive, by the way. That's kind of interesting how the timing of that works out. Was the USS Maine a false flag? Yeah, of course. That's the question, is it's not always about did these intelligence forces deliberately cause these events? Did they cause them through inaction? Did they put certain circumstances in place to ensure that some incident would happen which they can use for propaganda purposes? Sometimes it's all three. Sometimes, it's more about the way these incidents are used, I think, is when you can determine these moments. Like when for instance, just as an example, when a bunch of multiple different intelligence agencies are tracking certain, foreign dissidents or Saudi Arabian nationals, just as an example, going to flight school, getting into the country illegally, maybe with certain nefarious plans, and just weird as a weird coincidence, they just can't seem to get it together to grab these guys and stop them from hijacking a bunch of airplanes and then flying them into the World Trade Center, just as an example. Just as like a random example. And it's like, shucks, wouldn't you know it? I guess we really messed this one up. We had these guys and we let them slip through our fingers. We let them slip through our fingers. And they've crashed multiple planes into the World Trade Center. Well, what can you do now? I guess what we'll have to do is drastically limit people's civil liberties. Let's install a massive warrantless surveillance operation, first targeting Muslim people and then Americans, whatever Americans we don't like. And we'll invade multiple countries and create a multi-decade-long pretense for these powerful weapons conglomerates to feed at the trough of the never-ending money printing machine of the U.S. government. I guess we'll just have to do that. We really messed this one up, folks. Really messed this one up. And I guess there's just nothing we can do now but to proceed with our already existing plans of invasion and conquest and resource extraction projects and neoliberalization. I guess we'll just have to go ahead with that. Shucks. Darn. That's kind of how it's not always, we talk about these kind of conspiracies, I don't think it's always like necessarily a bunch of guys in a dark room smoking cigars and making these nefarious plots, but it's just this process where certain things are through either incompetence or ineptitude or some grander design are just kind of materialized in this way, and then of course it gets taken advantage of. It's convenient that they did find the one passport in the wreckage. It is true. It's also weird that all those guys were Saudi nationals. Those were Saudi Arabian nationals, which they knew immediately, literally the day after it, as soon as it happened, they knew exactly who it was. They knew exactly which Saudi Arabian nationals, highly financed Saudi Arabian nationals had done this. And they flew out all the powerful Saudi Arabian nationals that were still in the country, powerful politically connected Saudi Arabians, immediately removed them from the country. And there's never really been any investigation into that. And they invaded Afghanistan and Iraq afterwards, two countries which are notably not Saudi Arabia, the home of the 9/11 hijackers. It's weird how all that stuff happens, right? And that whole pretext is created, and then they have this unlimited excuse to carry out their foreign policy designs, which also happens to be immensely profitable to the multinational weapons manufacturers. which were looking around for an enemy following the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War. All of a sudden, it's the end of history. It's the end of history. That's not a good place to be if you're a weapons manufacturer. You need more conflict. You need more war and enemies that you can create, that you can fight. It was the end of history after the end of the Cold War, and these weapons manufacturers are looking around without a war to fight. And very conveniently, this incident, again, it just happened. Big mistake, big whoopsie. We really messed this one up because of all these miscommunications and all these different intelligence agencies. And by the way, after this incident, we're also, even though our intelligence industry completely fucked this up, we also have to drastically expand brand new intelligence bureaucracies, in addition to the ones that we already have. $2 trillion to 5 companies. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of greenbacks. That's a lot of greenbacks. And that's what I mean. Like there's many, you're talking about false flags. It's a common feature in the rise of fascism. And it's represented in Starship Troopers by Paul Verhoeven. You have the examples like, the USS Maine and the Gulf of Tonkin incident in Vietnam. I mentioned Indonesia. There was a whole assassination plot. Like the top military generals were kidnapped, and some were murdered in this foiled assassination plot, which was supposedly like this left-wing coup, which the CIA also helped the Indonesian military establishment spin into this there are these evil communist feminists that want to they're like witches and want to destroy civilization and stuff, spun it into this big kind of scary story, which they then used to overthrow the elected government and create a military dictatorship and carry out a mass murder campaign of kidnapping and torture and murder and suppression of left-wing people and trade unionists and people that were in political organizations. In the military, in Brazil, such an incident happened as well. This is all in Jakarta Method, by the way. I would really recommend. This is talking about Indonesia at Crad Babes. This is all in Jakarta Method, which if you've never read, I recommend everyone reads. It gets into the exact incident that kicked off the military coup in Indonesia, and talks about Brazil as well, which was really similar. The military dictatorship in Brazil was entrenched by this foiled coup or this foiled plot. There's the third largest communist party on earth, and we went ham. That's right. A famous horse. I thought you were calling me Ron as a bit. It's truly, and that's I've talked about it before. That's really the true horror of reading about this program in Indonesia in the Jakarta Method, is because it spends the whole first part of the book outlining kind of the future that could have happened. The really beautiful post-colonial movement, which was starting in Indonesia but was taking place throughout the third world. Which was rooted in, restoring land rights, solidarity, socialism, women's rights, overthrowing all the legacy of colonialism. Like we said, Indonesia, the third largest communist party in the world. And it's amazing to think about the world that would have existed without interference, imperialist interference. And Korea is a part of the puzzle piece as well. Famous horse. Indonesia was part of it. Yeah, it started in Korea, and they brought the same thing to Vietnam. But then also, it's the difference between Vietnam and Indonesia is you had this big, highly publicized, showy military invasion on one hand, versus the more subversive strategy which they employed in Indonesia to great success while failing in Vietnam. But in Indonesia, which they replicated throughout the world, of importing these military figures, creating sort of a state within the state in these other countries, training these anti-communist military establishment and putting it in place in these countries. So when their democratically elected socialist government got too out of pocket, they would be in place to have an anti-communist military coup. And this happened in Indonesia. They carried out the same thing in Chile, and that became kind of their anti-communist strategy when the big military invasion of Vietnam wound up turning into a quagmire. But really, really interesting talking about the ways that throughout the history of these fascist movements, there's these false flags, which are a big part of how these these fascist transitions begin. Yeah, and famous horse, the Indonesian Communist Party, despite being large, was very weak. They were not armed, not in charge of anything, and that's the interesting thing about Bevin's and Jakarta method is, I don't know what Bevin's politics are, but it's not really making an explicit argument about anything, but it's just through its own logical conclusion about these US-backed anti-communist movements is that the countries that were armed and were able to defend themselves, like North Korea, like Cuba, like China, were able to avoid being overthrown in this manner by the US, by the imperialists. And you had in the case of Chile, you had Fidel talking to Allende in Chile, and he specifically gave him an AK-47, if I remember correctly, and is like, you got to arm the proletariat. Allende wanted to go a different path. He wanted to go the non-violent route, and that's what happens. And this exact same thing happened in Indonesia, when you had Mao advising, was it President Sukarno? You have Mao advising Sukarno, you got to arm up. You got to defend yourself. You got to arm the proletariat. You got to be ready to defend your revolution. And Sukarno didn't want to go that route. They thought still that the US was a reasonable partner and that they could kind of walk this line between going the full USSR Soviet path or the Western path, the development. They thought that they were dealing with a sane negotiating partner in the West, and they thought they could walk that line. And military coup, false flag, military coup, mass murder campaign. That's the mistake that a lot of these early anti-colonial movements made, was believing that America was on their side, including Vietnam. Vietnam specifically, and Ho Chi Minh specifically made outreach to Americans and tried to reference American revolutionary spirit in their own struggle against colonialism. They thought that they could get the Americans on their side. But as these places all found out, America was not in any way interested in supporting any of these anti-colonial movements, and was only interested in creating the exact conditions for global economic domination for their multinational corporations, which they were defending. That's all they ever cared about, and would just murder and torture and kidnap and bomb and starve anyone that got in the way of that. Rereading Jakarta Method, The Face of Imperialism, and Washington Bullets, all within the last 2 weeks, really had me tear up multiple times, but seeing more and more indications that U.S. hegemony is collapsing really fills me with revolutionary optimism. Same thing with me, Relic. That's it's the exciting thing about being alive right now. There's a lot of grim shit going on if you live in the West. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to be alarmed. We've got the rise of fascism happening in the West here, even though we've always been more like a fascist society. Now we were seeing this sort of civility and the stuff that was disguising that kind of slowly be stripped away, and the violence and depravity of it is starting to really come to the forefront even more. But what's going on in the third world, and the fact that there is this shifting hegemony, and there is an opportunity for countries to start getting out from under the thumb of U.S. imperialism, that's incredibly exciting. That's one of the most exciting things about being alive right now. The hegemon fell off. That's right. And it's you gotta, if you know about this history, I think that's a really positive development. That's something we can celebrate. And that's why our role, in my opinion, as socialists in the West, is not just to try and deliver a better program for our citizens here, which obviously we need, but it's to do everything we can to destabilize the ability of our governments to reach out and crush these movements like they did in the past. You know, we need to try and prevent that from happening. And we need to give critical support to these developing countries that are now have this opportunity to develop their societies and their economies and their political systems outside of the influence of the United States and Canada and these Western countries. Let's fucking go, Ron. That's right. Thank you, famous horse.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Did you know that Insurgents listeners are part of the Thin Teal line?
The Thin Teal line. I like that. Thank you, really chill guy, for the 18 months resub at tier 1. Very, very much appreciated. That's right. The Insurgents listeners. The Thin Teal line. Defending us from the possibility of mild social democracy. Still can't believe I'm watching this show in my TRRS merch. We do be having merch now. Pretty exciting. Talking about, talking about all this stuff and the development of these global South countries, that actually leads me into something that I kind of wasn't sure I wanted to talk about, but it's a great opportunity to do so. To look at this thread of cope. It's a thread of copium from Anthony Blinken. I don't know if you saw this. I would actually like to see this video. I don't know if this press conference is on video. I hope so. We can actually try and find it. Did we see this though? This thread. And again, a lot of stuff going on that's depressing right now. A lot of stuff that's going on very depressing. I'll never argue with that. We can be really excited about this collapse of Western hegemony. Very exciting though. That's very exciting. And what's very funny to me is people like in the US government, like whether it's Anthony Blinken or whoever else, that are like, they have this kind of adorable notion. It's kind of adorable. It's kind of cute to me that they still think that they can prevent this. They can do something to like change course of this, or that they think that there's a possibility that America can like get back to where the place was. No, it's never going to happen, Anthony. Those days are gone now. It's over. It's over, Anthony. But they still have this kind of adorable notion that they can like struggle against this. I must say I enjoy it. So you have Anthony Blinken says China is the only country with both the intent and capability to fundamentally reshape the global order. And the fact check is true. Yeah. Fact check says true. The worst person you know just made a great point. Absolutely. And he continues, this is very good. China has announced its intention to carve out a sphere of influence in the Indo-Pacific. And I mean, it's just it's so fucking arrogant. Take the L, Anthony. Hold this L. This is Westoids posting their L's. It's so fucking funny that they talk about this without just dying of embarrassment. Anthony Blinken says China has announced its intention to carve out a sphere of influence in the Indo-Pacific. And it's like, what the fuck? What does America have to do? America has a sphere of influence in the Indo-Pacific, and they really believe that like they're the only one that's allowed to do that. And the idea that China would carve out its own sphere of influence in this region, which is geographically connected to where they live, unlike the United States, which is halfway around the fucking world. And they're saying it like this nefarious thing. They're on our territory. They're announcing their intention to carve out a sphere of influence in the Indo-Pacific. It's like, yeah, Anthony, that is what's going on. That is what's going on. And they have every right to do that. And the United States has no right to have, the United States has no fucking authority to just like lay claim to these parts of the world. They're not even close to where they live. Under Xi, the PRC has become more repressive at home and aggressive abroad. And again, citations needed for that. Aggressive abroad. We're seeing them like they've talked about building one military base, and they're building a bunch of schools and hospitals and roads and ports and stuff all throughout the developing world, and have launched a global development initiative, which is a significantly more appealing and attractive offer for these developing nations than the United States or any Western colonial country has ever offered them. If you wanted to describe that as being aggressive, then yeah, okay, maybe they are being aggressive. They're being aggressive in undercutting the endless exploitation of these Western countries on the developing world. That's what they're being aggressive about. And that's actually good. That's a good thing. We want that. And yeah, he's talking about COVID measures, which has saved millions of lives, whatever if you want to describe that as repressive, or other certain propaganda stories which have been shared about China, which we've talked about endlessly, including this week, which again, I would recommend people reevaluate when they're forming opinions about repressive political measures, and the information that they're basing this on is coming from CIA-backed groups, or think tanks funded by the weapons manufacturing industry. We have a lot of people that have uncritically accepted a lot of the reporting about that, based on these completely not only unreliable but just non-objective ideological sources who have a long history of lying and manipulating information in order to destabilize official Western enemies. Friendly reminder that Falun Gong literally runs the Epoch Times. That should tell you how seriously to take their claims. But we got a whole the compatible left, Ben. It actually agrees with the Epoch Times. They don't like it. They might not like it, but they happen to just agree about all these different points, along with agreeing with, Mike Pompeo, former head of the CIA. And these I'm talking about CIA-backed groups or the NED or whatever, or the actual CIA. Mike Pompeo, former CIA head, who is one of the centerpieces that is of this, the spread of this propaganda story. I'm not going to defend China, but it's rather strange to be focused on misdeeds abroad when worse misdeeds are being done domestically. Something about removing the beam in your own eye before attempting to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Yeah, and I will defend China, but I think you're right.
You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Which is that we don't really have...
It's been half a year. Did my slub rebate from President Xi get lost in the mail?
Which is that, it's not only is it not reliable to get information from this obviously biased anti-communist CIA-backed groups, but it's just complete fucking hypocrisy coming from Canada or the United States to wag our finger, get on some moral high horse about human rights in China or any country, considering our long history of brutal human rights atrocities and supporting violent dictatorships around the world. Banana Grabber, thank you very, very much for these 6 months of tier 1. Half a year did my slub rebate from President Xi get lost in the mail. It should be in the mail. So I would wait by the mail, and that should be coming any day now. Anyway, let's continue going down this thread. Blinken, we will shape the strategic environment around Beijing to shape the region and the world. To do, U.S. will invest, align, compete. And that's what I mean. That's what I was saying before. And in fact, I believe like when they say this, or we're going to compete. That's how we're going to do it. We're going to compete with Belt and Road. Again, it's not even about Anthony Blinken. Like we saw that amazing clip, I think, from some State Department official at one of those hearings, just saying, really earnestly saying, we don't understand why all these countries are all of a sudden choosing to develop with China, and why we're offering them aid and they're rejecting it. Like they genuinely don't understand. Like for whatever reason, they really just don't understand why any country would reject the like Western model of development of making these horrible deals with the IMF or the World Bank or the United States of America. And they're like, why are these other countries doing this? We don't understand. And it's like, because they're not stupid. They know exactly what making a deal with the IMF means. They know what Western development means. It's not a fucking secret anymore. And they're choosing to go with another direction because there's an offer on the table now that wasn't available previously that is not as based in brutal exploitation and occupation as the Western version of development is. That's why they're choosing these different models of development. It's not complicated. So that's what I mean when they say we're going to compete. We're going to compete with Belt and Road. We're going to really show. And it's like, you're not going to, no, you're not going to compete. It's over, sir. It's over, Anthony. You get nothing. You lose. Good day, sir. It's over. It's finished. Give up on this idea. Like that's the kind of thing, the cute thing that I was saying. It's kind of adorable. They still think that there's this like competition that's happening. You got outplayed like 12 moves ago, and they're still just flailing around. They can't even take care of their own country. They got people just dying in the street in their own country, and they're going to still think that they have credibility on some global stage to lecture China or any other country, or to offer some alternative for development and think that other countries are going to want to go along with that. They can't even take care of their own population. Their own infrastructure is collapsing. Why would any other country do this? But this American exceptionalist mindset obscures all this for these people, and they still think that there's an opportunity to go back to the way things were they were before. And human person, you're absolutely right. Feels like Kennedy was the last guy to even try to understand that. Absolutely, and that comes across in Jakarta Method quite a lot as well. And that's, of course, why he was a threat to the establishment, even though he was very much a part of the establishment, very conservative himself. But that's how fucking right-wing and fascist these people are. These people that run the United States, is that someone like Kennedy, who was one of them, but who had a slightly different vision for not being the most evil incarnate country. And that was too much for them because they had to be the most evil incarnate country because they're, fascists. So they had to get rid of him. Anyway, that's what's funny to me is that they really do still think that there's a chance. That there's a chance that they can reverse this. And they can't. It's over. They lost. They've already lost. And a lot of the flailing on the part of the West right now in the United States and all the accusations about human rights and everything that they're doing right now is evidence of that to me. Is that they're aware of this, and they're just raging. They're raging against their own incompetence and the complete futility of struggling. It's like you might as well struggle against gravity or the tides. It's already over. And a lot of the flailing we're seeing right now is just like a refusal to accept that. Yeah, not even the JFK was a lefty. He just wasn't a fascist like the rest American power. Like, he wasn't an actual fucking Nazi. Let's be clear about who it was that was pulling the strings behind this. Right? Let's be clear about the people that formed the CIA and that formed these deep state intelligence communities. These were Nazis. Let's be clear about this. And JFK was conservative, but he wasn't a Nazi. And they needed other Nazis in charge, or at least people that are going to get with the program. Yeah, no, of course the business plot, that's what I mean. The business plot didn't fail. It didn't fail. It's just they had a setback. They waited for their time to strike. And they engaged in this more of a war of attrition to slowly roll back every single bit of gains that had been made by working class people in the United States. U.S. has many enduring strengths. So going back to Blinken here, U.S. has many enduring strengths and time-tested capacity for reinvention. Who believes this anymore? No one believes this. No, like this is no one believes this, especially people in the global south, especially people in the developing world, the imperial periphery, whatever you want to call it. It's really like that whole like the emperor has no clothes moment. Like that's what we're living through right now, and the whole world, everyone sees it. Especially all these countries that have been under the boot of Western oppression and exploitation and imperialism for generations. Decades and decades. They see it full well as well. No one believes this anymore, but the enduring strength and time-tested capacity for reinvention. Absolute horseshit. Based on U.S. advantages, the competition on technology and innovation is ours to lose. We can stay vigilant about national security without closing our doors. The American people have great respect for the Chinese people as they're trying to like destabilize and balkanize their country. Which would, and if they ever got their way, balkanizing China or which of course will never happen, getting some kind of coup or revolution or color revolution or overthrow of the Communist Party of China, or the Chinese Communist Party, excuse me. Wait, no, the Communist Party of China, the CPC, right? The CPC. Trying to get the right acronym. It's the CCP. That's what the Reddit liberals really are against. The CCP. And with the CPC. If they ever did get their way and overthrow the government in the CPC, Chinese people would, of course, be the first primary victims of that. And all the progress that's been made in the development and the elimination of extreme poverty would be rolled back, and Chinese people would go back to being a de facto colony of the West, which is what our leaders would like it to go back to. We do not seek to transform China's political system, but the future belongs to those who believe in freedom. Freedom like the famous American democracy. Which is still, no one believes that this is a fucking democracy. Chinese citizens have more democratic input into their government than Americans do. That's just a fact. And if you don't believe that's true, you are unfortunately a victim of Western propaganda. Sorry to say. I know it's upsetting sometimes to hear this. We're standing up new coalitions to meet the needs of our people and address the challenges in the Indo-Pacific. The Quad has become a leading regional team. We're enhancing peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific, including through the AUKUS agreement. Yes, forming a new NATO-like military alliance to interfere and occupy, the South China Sea for a deliberate threat, is enhancing peace and security and trying to turn Taiwan into the next Ukraine. And deliberately trying to provoke China into that kind of a conflict in the same way that they provoked Russia through NATO. That's really the last 10 years of provoking the Russia-Ukraine conflict has really increased peace and stability in Ukraine, hasn't it? And I'm sure the same thing will happen in the Indo-Pacific through this kind of AUKUS provocation also. We're aligning U.S. policies toward the Indo-Pacific with allies in Europe. And I think most allies in Europe are wising up to the writing on the wall and are going to end up in the China camp sooner rather than later, which is going to be a glorious day when this comes. These actions are all aimed at defending and, where necessary, reforming the global order, want to drive a race to the top. And we know very well that they are trying to defend the global rules-based order, and we know who's involved in that rules-based order and who is not, and who's allowed to break these so-called rules and who isn't. And it's what you're talking about. Preserving this global order that Blinken was referring to is in fact a Western-led global criminal cartel that the United States is at the heart of, the head of, and that Canada and other countries are the sort of junior partners in. It's not about forcing countries to choose, it's about giving them a choice when they're going to choose China, obviously. We believe and we expect the business community to support that the price of access to the PRC market cannot sacrifice human rights or long-term competitiveness. A lack of reciprocity is unacceptable and unsustainable. And I agree, but we all know where that intransigence is coming from. We'll fight for American workers and industry with every tool we have. We don't want decoupling, but Beijing is seeking asymmetrical decoupling to make the world more dependent on China and China less dependent on the world. That just seems like smart geopolitical strategy to me. That's precisely what America has been doing, spending the last 70 years doing. And it's been a total fucking disaster. Competition need not lead to conflict. We will not seek it. We will work to avoid it. But we will defend our interests. No shit. We're pushing integrated deterrence with allies and partners, shifting operational concepts, posture, and military capabilities to... There's just a little bit more of this. On Taiwan, our approach has been consistent for decades. No change. We oppose any unilateral changes to the status quo, which is interesting because according to the status quo, Taiwan is a part of China, which the United States has agreed to, the one China policy. And it's interesting to take this place, which you've agreed is a part of China for decades, and are instead arming and funding the government there and creating a military buildup in Taiwan and in the area surrounding it, which is a weird status quo for me. If you acknowledge that they're part of China while also using them to deliberately provoke China and using the threat of independence as a sort of an axe over China's head. China's policy toward Taiwan has changed. More coercion across diplomatic, economic, and military arenas. Maintaining cross-strait peace and stability is not just a U.S. interest, it's regional and global. U.S. will seek reduction in crisis management mechanisms with China, pursue intense diplomacy along with intense competition. China and the U.S. must keep working together to address Iran and DPRK nuclear programs and remain ready to discuss with Beijing our responsibilities as nuclear powers. And I think what's actually going to happen is that China is going to continue to support Iran and DPRK as they should. Iran and DPRK should both have nuclear programs. It's one of the things that have kept these countries relatively protected them from the threat of outside imperialist invasion for now decades. If Iran had a nuke, they would have a lot more leverage and be able to undercut this relentless sanctions regime that they've been living under for now decades and decades, which is violent and an act of war itself. Blinken will continue to engage with China not as a favor or by trading away principles, instead to act as responsible great powers. I've never been more convinced about the power and purpose of American diplomacy. To the U.S. people, let's recommit to investing in our core strength. Let's bet on ourselves, like Fred Van Vliet. Here's what everything boils down to: advancing human progress in a world that's more prosperous and more free. And the fact is, to go back to the original point, the world, in fact, is going to be more prosperous and more free, and that's going to be a result of the decline of the United States, and it's going to be the collapse of the Anglosphere and the decline of the American empire. That's what's going to end the rise of China as an even more powerful global hegemon, offering this alternative in development. The global South countries, that's actually what's going to make the world more prosperous and free, not more imperialism, more intervention, more endless decades of United States and Western-led hegemony. Man, I've really been talking nonstop. I'm on like a really serious role there, talking about all this stuff. I was ignoring chat. I'm sorry for ignoring chat. I was really going off there. Blinken used a lot of words to say, Deng embedded the West in China and we will collapse without them. Yeah, that's basically the point, isn't it? This man trying to cement himself as one of the biggest ghouls in the most ghoulish country ever. And that's the thing, these guys are just they're not long for power anyways. There's going to be even more ghoulish American imperialists taking over soon. Do we have a pic of the man who brought down Western hegemony? Folks, you don't have to like it. You don't have to like it. There's nothing saying you have to like it. I think you should, personally, but you don't have to like it. But it is true that Deng Xiaoping, he won. He won. He was right. He was right and we were wrong. I'm sorry to say. I know it's upsetting for some people, but it's true. None of this happens without Deng. It just doesn't. That's whatever arbitrary rules you want to put on, or call him a revisionist, or betrayed the revolution, whatever Western sanctimonious, like, ultra-left finger-wagging you want to do, none of this would be happening. None of this shift in polarity right now, this big realignment that's happening right now, none of it would be happening without Deng. That's just the reality. That's just the reality. He understood the assignment. That's right. Yeah, and that's Relic. I wanted to bring that up. Yeah, China and Russia recently just vetoed new sanctions on the DPRK in the UN for the first time since 2006. Another indication for U.S. hegemony decline. Yeah. And we love it. All the U.S. has been doing is unilaterally altering the status quo. USA, yeah. Hey, China, don't politicize Taiwan. That's right. Just keep letting us send arms and arms to the government and encouraging them to split away into like an independent country. The Taiwanese, and that's the thing, carrier wave, Taiwanese observing Ukraine. Like, we should get in on that. That's the amazing thing. There was that Politico piece, how they want to put like the Ukraine model. They want there's these people in the national security establishment. That's what they want for Taiwan. They want the Ukraine model. And it's like, I can just imagine being in Taiwan and being like, that sounds great. Thank you. Thank you, America. Oh boy, how generous. The Ukraine model for Taiwan. Wow, it's gonna be great for people that live in Taiwan, certainly. Just as it's been going great for the people in Ukraine. I know the propaganda says it's all smiles over there right now, but if you dig into that a little bit, you'll find that it's actually not accurate. A lot of indication coming from Zelensky's camp right now, actually, that it's like things are a lot more grim. Even Western media is starting to promote actual news stories about the really grim outlook for the Ukrainian military right now, which is a sign that it's almost fucking over for them. It's true. This is the guy. This is the guy that destroyed U.S. hegemony. Again, you don't have to like it. You don't have to, but it's him. Regardless of some of the terrible foreign policy decisions that China made along this time, which I think were partially to ensure that the West was convinced that they were kind of getting on side, did more to struggle against imperialism than a lot of Westerners could ever even hope to. A lot of our Western ultra-communist, ultra-leftist friends that love to lecture about this kind of thing did more to undo the evils of imperialism than any of these fuckers ever could. The Poindexter on the right knows what's coming. It's true. He's like, this shouldn't be. We're screwed now. No one knows how screwed we are. Buddy on the right reads Lenin. I would hope so. I would certainly hope so. I really talked a lot today. I was planning on taking the rest of the afternoon to like watch like a video or something, or not talk quite as much. But again, this is the sacrifice I make for this community. This is the sacrifice that I make for this community. And I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to do it, folks. This is my commitment to you. I'm trying to find that Politico piece here. About the Taiwan model. I can't find it. I don't know if y'all are Star Wars fans or not, but episode 1 of Kenobi was dope. I'm willing to give it a watch. I'm kind of out on the new Disney Star Wars stuff, but I do like McGregor. Ewan McGregor, Obi-Wan is pretty cool. Having him back in the fray. Found that a co-worker committed suicide a week ago. Announced at work he lost his battle with PTSD. A veteran, I think, though I never met him. I'm sorry to hear that, Electric Boot. Very sad. Been lurking, little tired today. Good content. Thank you, Dave. And his only sustenance was a single Diet Pepsi. That's true. And half a glass of water, which I think is half full. Because I'm an optimist. Let me see if I can find the piso stuff. It's Politico. Yeah, this. Here we go. Like, imagine being in Taiwan. You're in Taiwan and you're like, oh, cool. This is great. U.S. quietly urging Taiwan to follow Ukraine playbook for countering China. Let me just get right on that. Thank you, America. Thank you. Mao built up the revolution, the infrastructure, and the workforce. Deng used it to bait the West to move all its manufacturing to China and build up its wealth. And Xi uses the wealth to give the final blow to U.S. hegemony by helping nations and poor people at home and abroad. I think all of them are very important and should be celebrated by the left all around the world. Couldn't agree more, Relic. And the really exciting thing about China is, to me, is like that their plan is like bringing them to like 2050. And that's what makes me excited. Like, providing we don't get sucked into World War III, which we very well might, the idea of what the level of development that China could be at in 2050, I think that's really exciting to think about. When we think about the difference between, not even the difference between like the 70s and now, but just the difference between 2008 China and today, the change that's happened. And we think about like what the society is going to look like in another 25 years from now. It's like unfathomable to think about, you know? You know, they'll have flying trains and Star Trek food replicators. Like, who fucking knows? I don't know. I'm not gonna put down an official prediction of a food replicator, but like, it does seem like that's where all the progress is going, and that's where that's where the future is. You know, and like Anthony Blinken can talk about how he wants it to be this. They're going to work together and they want to counter it, but it's like there's nothing that we got decline. That's what we have to look forward to in the West. Decline, and then hopefully a socialist revolution somewhere along the way there. And then we can get on board with their program, and we can finally stop antagonizing this country, and we can work with them to rebuild our economies, to rebuild our infrastructure, to develop our own countries in a non-Western, non-capitalist strategy. That's hopefully where that's where we're going, hopefully. Sign me up for that Ukraine model, though. That sounds great. Thanks, America. Mm. But they're gonna have more ships than the U.S. More ships. Can't allow a ship gap. Absolutely not. Yeah, Chicago needs BRI. We all need, like, America does need BRI. America should be the prime fucking recipient of it. Frankly, not the prime. Obviously, the developing world needs it more, but like, America's in dire need. There's towns across America just falling apart. America's in absolute dire need of some infrastructure and development. Canada could use a high-speed rail system. Yeah, Canada too, absolutely. Why don't we have high-speed rail? And people were talking about climate change in the chat. I think Canada's something to, like, I think that's an interesting subject, right? Because if you look at like 2100 climate models, this like nightmare scenario, where we're currently heading, where there's big swaths like of the world close to the equator, which are going to be it's completely uninhabitable for a lot of the year. It's going to limit the ability to do food growth. If you look at like Canada and like the North, you know, because the vast majority of Canadians live like right on the border, United States border, essentially. But like north of the country, that's going to be like the temperate zone. That's where everything's going to be able to grow. So like that's one climate change plan, frankly, is that we could start massively investing in building infrastructure in places where we know for sure that people are going to be able to live and people are going to be able to grow food primarily. And what we could do is start building massive new infrastructure projects in places where we know are going to be more or less temperate still during climate change, figure out how to feed everyone, start doing this stuff now, and open our doors for anyone in the world, because there's a lot of space. It's a big country. Big, massive country. A lot of room for everybody. We can build brand new infrastructure, big, green cities and green infrastructure in these temperate zones, and open our doors to everyone around the world that wants to come and be part of this project with us. We'll be smuggling people in this community in, absolutely. But then this is like pie in the sky ideas of what could happen decades from now. What is more likely to happen is that we're going to spiral into further fucking mistrust and conflict with the rest of the world, and totally blow any opportunity that we have now to build this kind of infrastructure and have it in place for when these consequences come in. That's the more likely scenario. But sometimes I like to imagine a better scenario when we do good things instead of bad things. And giving up on this hostility with China and working with this new global superpower on developing a society of the future that's going to be sustainable is, I think, something we should be doing, rather than spiraling into more mistrust and conflict and economic warfare and proxy wars and violence, and nothing good is going to come of any of that. This sounds nice, but have you considered World War III bunkers and Ukraine models? That's right, or Albanian bunkers. Imagine a world where the US was getting developed by China. Well, actually, they kind of are in a way. And the UK was already had China do its 5G infrastructure and power plants. And the government was like, that's treachery, ban them and steal their money. Yeah. Unbelievably short-sighted, mindset. To be cutting ourselves off and to be deliberately provoking conflict with this country. The people that are running our society are just absolute fucking goons and morons. They're short-sighted morons and they're fucking goons. Canada almost started developing partnerships with China before the US anti-China rhetoric started. Yeah, I mean, it's like there's an interesting. I bet a lot of that also started when we thought that they were going to be more of a Western partner and not something that was going to supplant the power structure. That was one thing, and I think we started a lot of these partnerships when we still thought that they were going to be basically a Western colony. Yeah, then the Canadian government, exactly. We arbitrarily kidnapped Meng Wanzhou at the behest of the U.S. State Department, and then in the ultimate fuck you move, they kidnapped a couple of our guys, our not spies, the precious Michaels, provoking this 2-year national meltdown over our beautiful boys, the beautiful Michaels. With every opinion columnist across the ideological spectrum in this country crying for the beautiful Michaels every single fucking day. Until we did what we could have done all along and just let Meng Wanzhou go, at which point we got them back. Yeah, come on, China, we're a colony, it's not so bad. We still wanted to be in charge, though. Folks, when we talk about China, this kind of development strategy, what's the main thing we always when we talk about these Deng Xiaoping economic reforms? What was it about? It was about building their productive forces, wasn't it? It was about building their productive forces. And one thing that I have to do right here on Twitch is build the productive forces of this very show that you're watching right now. TRRS, aka the Rob Rousseau Show, which I never really say the words Rob Rousseau Show, but that's technically what it is. I'm 7 subs away from the sub goal. Electric Boot, I did a big pitch segment before. I think I'm out of energy. I'm running low on energy. I did a big pitch segment before. I just did a big rant about this where I've been talking nonstop. However, Electric Boot, I do suggest you subscribe to the channel.
Me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Ron Descartes.
I do recommend you subscribe to the channel. You get all the emotes when you subscribe. And in fact, when you subscribe at tier 3, I don't say this enough. Not only do you build my productive forces, you get your very own TRRS Deng Xiaoping emotes, which I believe this is the only Deng emote you can access on Twitch. If you subscribe at tier 3, you can use the Deng Xiaoping emote. Rob is subverting your productive forces. That's right, Dakadude. And thank you very much, Sans Mod Badge 420 for the 3 months of tier 1. Very much appreciated, Sans Mod Badge. Thank you very much. So I'm 6 subs away, folks. 6 subs away. Again, if you're on Amazon Prime, you can subscribe completely free of charge using your monthly Amazon Prime subscription. You can do that. You can gift subs as well. We don't need to get into the whole friendship triangle thing. We don't need to get into that whole thing again. I did a big spiel about this earlier. But you can be a part of this amazing, wonderful community. This life-changing community, which has changed my life, frankly. And I hope that it's touched some of your lives as well. Nothing terrorizes reactionary gamer bros like communist emotes. And this channel has a lot of communist emotes.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Goodness gracious. Electric Boot, thank you very, very much for the tier 1 sub. These 6 months tier 1 sub. Don't see a lot of those. Thank you very much, Electric Boot. Very kind of you. We don't need to get into whether this is or isn't a cult. I mean, it's not important. It's not important. The Deng emote is locked because you have to be a tier 3 sub, unfortunately. You have to be a tier 3 sub. Does it count as 6 subs? No, because it's going to repeat each month. You have to be a tier 3 sub. It's kind of my whole thing about the productive forces and, Deng and the economic reforms. It's kind of a little gag. We're going to circle back on the whole cult thing. We will circle back on all that. So, folks, this is what it comes down to. I saved $2 whole by subbing 6 months in advance, and you can too, chat. And first of all, I'd also recommend everyone join the Discord server. All the new community members, please join the Discord server. It's really great. That's where this community is kind of hanging out when the show is not live. All kinds of amazing stuff going on in the Discord server. Movie nights, book clubs, multiple book clubs, theory book clubs, multiple movie night series. Frankly, it's kind of insane the level of community.
You've just become an elite member of the Friendship Triangle.
Oh my gosh, Dakadoon, thank you so much. I believe this is the second time today Dakadoon's gifted 5 subs. I'm not mistaken. Goodness gracious, Dakadoon, thank you for your generosity. Very much appreciated. Very much appreciated. Joining the Discord changed my life. We love to hear it. We love to hear it. Dakadoon, I really appreciate that. Thank you. Double Elite. Double Elite. And one for the road.
Wow. Okay, Rob. Seriously, wow.
Thank you again, Dakadoon. Very much, seriously, very much appreciated. And thank you everyone for watching the stream today and hanging out and supporting the show. I love you all. I love you all. Oh, here's a question for you, by the way. Got a little question for you before I go. Okay, got a little question for you. What do we think of these? I posted these in the Discord, but I haven't tried them on the stream. I impulse bought. I really have a thing for impulse buying like cheap like gas station sunglasses, or like Walmart, or these. I got these at Canadian Tire. What do we think about this though? How's this working for you? So I really like these glasses. I wasn't sure about the lenses. Usually I wear like darker sunglasses. These are like kind of like transition-y in a way. So like you can wear them outside more when it's not as like if it's overcast. If it's like not quite as sunny out, you can still wear them and it's not like super dark sunglasses. I would wear outdoors because of the reflections on the monitor. Yeah, they're very like they really reflect everything. You can see my whole setup here in front. You can see chat in the reflection. That's right. I like Whistler in Sneakers. There's that scene from Sneakers. Reflection in his glasses. Anyway, I really like these though. You can't see, there's no porn tabs. No porn tabs. Come on now. What are porn tabs? No idea. No idea, I'm afraid. Thank you, folks, for watching the stream. Very, very much appreciated. As always. Again, join the Discord server, folks. I'm gonna raid our friend Bloodberry Tart, entertaining Twitch streamer and Twitter user as well. Just want to say, in the short time I've been here, I've learned a lot and I like your soft-spoken style. Thank you, Sans Mod Badge. I appreciate that. I appreciate that a lot. We're trying to do something a little bit different in this community. You know? I think when I got started doing this, I looked around and saw what was going on politically on Twitch. And I was like, a lot of this stuff is not for me. I want to create a space here that's maybe a little bit different. The vibes are a little bit different. And it seems to have really, like, people have really responded to that. Sans is usually pronounced like sans without the D. It wants the D though. But unfortunately, because you're heathen Americans, what that means is sans. It's a French word, sans, which means without. C'est sans. So I'm not gonna say sans. I'll go get my croissant witch. My croissant witch. Talk to you folks on Monday.